I think TFM was talking about sex dolls actually reducing like sexual violence, and so I think that actually might be.
We're actually live two theories. One says it normalizes rape. The other theory is it will just get the sexually frustrated guys to fuck dolls and reduce rape. I don't believe either
that
theory.
Also assumes that men are retarded and don't know what the difference is between a doll and a...
Anyway,
so guys, that was my cue for I'm properly introducing this stream. But of course, our conversation about sex dolls just spills over into the live. This is so unprofessional. Anyway, this is Academics Respond to Women Respond to the Men's Movement. We have a colorful cast of characters here. Many people who've been here before. Everybody say hi.
Hello.
Hello.
Oh, pilleater. I forgot. Well, I did that at everyone, but I didn't send you a personal message. If you want to hop on in my Discord, it's just anyone in the voice chat can just chat. Dumb debate is not 20. Oh, another one. Well, we're stream sniping. We're stream sniping CNN. We're taking them down.
Go for it.
So what is CNN doing?
It's another Democratic debate. They had one just a couple of days ago. I was actually watching it. I was playing Octopath Traveler and watching it, and it was like the worst thing I've ever seen. So maybe the second one will also
what
be
did you expect?
Terrible.
I
know, Pilleater's excited for Andrew Yang. I mean,
it's kind of sad.
I am not. I was very disappointed.
It's kind of sad to see they're just destroying each other.
Oh, that's the part I like.
Andrew
That's the
Yang
only
a
good
little
part.
bit.
But hey, I'll keep an egg in the collapsitarian basket just in case it comes to that. There might be a little bit of rain in the background of my mic where we had typhoons yesterday, so it's still quite rainy, and there's not really much I can do about that. Alright, but I'm going to go ahead and launch into this a little bit. This is a shorter one. It's only like 5 or 6 pages. As always, they're all available in the Women Respond to the Men's Movement channel, the sub-chat thing of it. So this one's called Men's Predicament, Male Supremacy by Harriet Gill. As a longtime feminist, I find the new men's movement encouraging, interesting, yet problematic. I see that some men are making efforts to become more conscious, even attempting an acquaintance with their own soul. I try to understand the goal of the movement from what the media, the documentaries, the books, and the workshops are saying about it. My research leads me to this conclusion. The road men are taking toward the goal of liberation has but one obstacle that will prevent them from reaching the mark of transforming growth we call liberation. That obstacle is male supremacy. While men are indeed reaching for a new sense of what being a man today could mean, I do not see that these efforts include a wish to share real power with women, or to rise to full equality with women. A stunningly practical example of such sharing comes from Professor Robert McElvain, who suggested recently that one of our country's biggest strongholds of power be shared, by reserving half the seats in Congress for women. The fact that this image is so startling indicates how far men are from a willingness to truly share power. So that's the first two paragraphs. We can state the obvious about that honest proposal.
Aren't Congress people supposed to be, elected?
Aren't you supposed to run for an office in order to be elected?
Yeah, I wonder, would they draft women into filling these seats if not enough women run?
But that's a basic situation. There's very few women who are running for these positions of power for many reasons. And I can't make out one specific case where they said, oh, it's a man's club, it's a boys' club, this is glass ceiling, I can't run for office. I've never really had a case where a woman actually said that.
Well, something interesting is that as far as participation in, say, politics goes, it seems to vary precipitously by region, even within the first world. So I think in Japan, female participation in parliament is like 12, 13%, as in women in parliament, which is about the same pretty much as Saudi Arabia. And then in South Korea, it's 17%, right? And then in the the UK, and I think it's in this general ballpark as well in America and in Europe, it's like 30%, so it's double. And it makes you wonder which one of those represents the quote-unquote authentic participation and which one represents the basically affirmative action. I get the sense that the appropriate number or the pure merit-based number is closer to what the Japanese have, and that in the West we're basically filling these positions with women based on, well, other reasons. So yeah.
Well, I can only
I don't
speak.
think
Yeah.
I don't think women have the necessary life experiences to actually be a good leader anyway.
I just know that.
So I wouldn't want them in there anyway.
I just know that the number, the
Hashtag
percentage
not all.
rose.
We got a hashtag not all at the beginning of every
Because-
stream.
Yeah.
Not all.
Some women, like some men, like it's also a very small percentage of men who go into politics. But I know for a fact that the percentage of women actually elected into office rose when all parties said we want to have a gender quota. So they push the candidates that are female, so we can't even vote for the men in many cases. And now it's going up by force.
And I think towards the beginning of the 20th century, there was honestly very little interest on the part of most women in being involved with politics, with the exception of the few radical activist types, like what's her name, Rosa Luxemburg, the Rosa Luxemburgs of the world, but those are rare people.
It's like I think Jordan Peterson addressed this in one of his talks. Like there's a very small percentage of people who actually want power, and the variation in the men, we have more of those, but it's a very small percentage. It's like less than 5%. There's very few men who actually want that kind of job because it sucks. I mean, around here it pays quite well, but you actually have to work and you have to be on top of topics, like many topics, to even do the job right.
Yeah, and the women who do end up in those positions are seldom as highly motivated as men are in the same positions, in my opinion, because they just don't have as much reason to be, because women's SMV, sexual... Actually, I shouldn't use that phrase. Basically, their sexual capital, their sexual value isn't really tied to their competence or their hierarchical social status in the same way that men's is. So men tend to be more motivated to get into those things. I'm not saying that women can't also do it, but it's just their motivations are different by necessity.
Right, like, I don't think that there's anyone really has a problem with a female leader if she's actually competent. The problem is that they're usually never competent because they've been coddled since birth and they don't have the necessary life experiences to really lead or know what action to really, like, prioritize any...
And the ones who are even more interesting is that the ones who are typically, in my experience, tend not to be feminists. I don't know if she's the best example. Like, I don't know how great she is, really, but people talk about Judge Judy, Apparently she was asked about whether or not she was a feminist, and she said no.
Oh,
I
she's
think
my
Margaret
favorite. I
Thatcher
love
also
Judge Judy.
said she wasn't.
Half the time they don't even want to go because they're usually fucking... They're used to sitting on their ass and just letting men do else. So, like, why the fuck would they? Why would they run?
It's actually I don't have much respect for politicians, but I think it's actually quite a hard job to get there from nothing. Like, if you're not from a rich family, or if you're not from an oligarchy where your father was already a politician or your mother was already a politician, it's actually quite a hard work to get there without any quotas. So many men say, fuck that, the benefits don't outweigh the effort I put in. And it's a risk that I don't even get elected, so why would I do that?
I will say, though, Dr. Mary Ruwart is one person I would love to see in power, I would just make her dictator of the world. If the benevolent dictator theory has any validity, she's definitely the one. Alright,
I would have to look into that one.
She's
I just
amazing.
know that, look, Margaret Thatcher, she was called the Iron Lady. And I think she was basically a man in the way she acted as a politician, as a prime minister, what do you call it in England? Maybe
Yeah,
you can
that's
help
it.
me,
Oh,
Ashley?
and actually, I'm glad you mentioned that because that is kind of the case. So, like, I think one of the reasons women don't run is because men are already doing things for women. Like, if you watch this Democratic debate they just had, they'll mention climate change is going to cause an apocalypse, and we're going to lose all of our jobs, and all of our homes are going to cost way too much, and we're all going to be homeless and unemployed and dying. Also, women's rights, women's abortion rights. You know what I mean? It's like to see that elevated among these other things, whatever they can think to be the top women's issue, it's right up there. And this is the men, saying this and pointing this stuff out. So what you have is, the men are gynocentric, so the men put women first. And then when you get women in politics, they do this very explicitly, very solipsistic, very bigoted pro-woman agenda. So, I would think it'd be horrific.
Just think about the right to vote. I don't know if it's in all Western countries, but in my country, it was up to the men. They had a vote. Should women be allowed to vote? And the men said yes. Women should have the right to vote. They always scratch it off to the suffragettes and everything, but it was the men. They could have said no, They wanted them to have this right. They were already for the women before the women even got the right to vote. And now the politicians, they always try to appeal to women because in most countries it's like 51, 54% of the population are women, so you gotta secure the women's vote.
Yeah, and there's that. It's partly like an optical thing, and like the other thing too is when you do see female leaders, right? Like not just like elected representatives, but like actual people who are like heads of their state, they act like men. They're very mannish because those are the kinds of women that are cut out for the task. Like Tulsi Gabbard's demeanor. It's very confident and very masculine. She doesn't have this kind of like sensitive kind of wavering sort of a demeanor that you see in some of the other Democratic candidates. Like Kirsten Gillibrand sometimes sounds like she's like on the verge of tears, It's always very emotional. And, that's an angle that's appealing to some people, but I think that in general, I think people really like this image of a very strong and capable woman.
You can't, you can have a female leader, but you can't have a female leader who leads in a typically female way. It just doesn't work. And this is something that was remarked upon with the monarchs. So Queen Victoria was all of the monarchs in English history. It was a thing where you hold your head up high. You don't express your emotions in public too much because you don't want to be seen as weak. For the female monarchs, just as much as the males. I mean, there was this case when I think it was when Princess Diana died, or something. Anyway, there was some death in the royal family or in a group tangential to them or related to them in some way. And people were talking in Britain about how horrible it was. It was really strange, actually, how bad it was that the Queen wasn't crying in public. Like, she declined to make a public spectacle. Excuse me. Fuck's sakes. Public spectacle of her emotions. Because that's not the sort of thing that you're supposed to do in that position. But most people didn't get that for whatever reason. They wanted her to bellyache a lot in public.
Well, might have to do with the fact that she wasn't actually the leader legally of the country at the time. She was more like a representative of the royal household that you Brits still somehow keep around for whatever reason.
Oh, sure, but it was like, it's still a thing in those circles that you're not supposed to publicly express emotion too much. And I think there's a reason for it. It's they're not technically leaders anymore in any real way, but it's just because of that legacy, or the legacy of those kinds of, I guess, martial values, you could call them.
Yeah, but I think that's a weird thing about our current culture. Like when you see a strong woman in a movie, that's basically a man. From the way she acts and she talks and whatever, they're basically writing the role for a man and casting a woman.
Well, that's
not necessarily bad, as long as they account for, like, you know, like, an annoying thing is that, like, they'll give, like, a lot of these action movies where, like, there's a female hero, like, they'll give them, like, male, like, upper body strength and, like, all these, like, action flicks. So, like, if they account for, like, you know, women being weaker physically and not trying to make, like, women look like these fucking demigods in these movies, then I think that would be okay. Or, you know,
the last movie I remember that depicted a strong woman in a feminine way, I think, was James Cameron's Alien.
Yeah, I think that's a good thing, because Ripley wasn't as strong as, say, the Marines physically, but she had, like, determination, and, you know, she had motherly instinct.
That was a perfect depiction of a strong woman to me.
She was
personally.
still pretty emotionally masculine, I would say. But yeah, I know what you mean.
It just get back to the point. I think like we still have this cliche that female leaders need to be basically men these days, but with tits and vagina. And
I guess this author, she seems to think that if we were to have more female leaders, that, you know, somehow they'll have like a more feminine way of leading. And I can see how if you sort of mandate women to fill the role by setting aside half of it and saying only women can do this, you actually might see something very different. You might see some very not typically masculine women in power. But insofar as we've seen that far, it's very, very selfish. It's very self-centered, and it's completely...
You don't mandate this. You woman-date this.
Yeah.
You people date this. But,
I also wanted to read, Macho had mentioned a few things, that in Canada, if you wanted to vote in the federal election, you needed to have the right in the province. And that's really interesting. That seems really obviously heinously immoral, that people in other provinces get to vote on national policy that affects you, but then since you're in a province that doesn't get to vote, you don't get to vote on the national level. God, Canada's the worst. Like, no offense, but I mean, who can talk? Every country's the worst, but... and then also, the note on the Queen, I wouldn't want to make anyone's death a public display of my emotions. 100% agree. Like, everybody complains that politicians are super fake, yet everybody also demands that they be fake. And that's why I like very emotionally unconventional people in the spotlight. It's more authentic.
Yeah, but there was this one really upsetting quote by Christine Lagarde, this French chick that's currently the highest up for the banking system in the European Union, where she said the financial crisis, which they all say started with Lehman Brothers, wouldn't have happened if it was the Lehman Sisters. Like, women would have done it differently. If there only had been women in charge, everything would have gone differently. And that was one of the most sexist things I've ever heard. Like, women are so great, so benevolent, they would have never fucked up the market in America by giving all those people houses that they couldn't afford. Like, women wouldn't have done this.
And women
That's
will
evil.
prevent all war, too. That's the other common argument in this book. Also, welcome, Pilleater. Nice to see you made it.
Hi, guys.
Hope you had a nice walk.
Hello.
Even though queens actually started more wars statistically than king.
Yeah, I mean, it's a little bit unfair, right? That does come with a caveat. They were more likely to have people try to take over their throne, because since they were a woman, if you could, like, marry her, then you would take things over. So that kind of
Also,
offsets them being more warmongering. So it's kind of equal.
Also, they were more likely to become queens if their brothers or husbands or fathers were killed in war. So that's not really a statistical fact.
I mean, I suppose. But I have other statistics I could bring up, probably proving that, like, if women had, like, like the physical strength and aptitude of men, that they'd start just as many wars, if not more so, than men.
There are numbers that the female wards in concentration camps were more cruel than the male ones. That's an established fact. Yeah, so I don't think that there's any gender that's better than the other, if you know what I mean. We are equal but different, but men aren't more benevolent, women aren't more benevolent. That's
Alright.
crazy talk.
Well, let's go ahead and take another bite out of this. I may just charge through the full page here and switch it over, and then we'll see if anything sticks out as worthy of comment. So she continues, male supremacy is the assertion and the silent assumption by men that men is superior to woman. This belief, from phallus worship to the worship of an omnipotent father god, has justified the oppression and exploitation of women throughout history. It establishes and defends a pervasive double standard: legal, social, economic, philosophic, religious, moral. Because men are immersed in this tacit sense of superiority, they do not look at it or see it for what it is. It does not occur to them to do so, and if it did, I do not know whether they would wish to. Male supremacy demands a serious and persevering analysis of what it means to men, what positions it forces them into, how the very privilege it gives them at the same time exacts a great price. Robert Bly has said, talking of reality is iron. Where in the world is that iron that will bring men to look at the male supremacy in which they live? How can they discover that male supremacy itself lies at the base of their predicament? The hidden message in the men's movement today is, in effect, we men will retain our superior power, even increase it. In the meantime, we will find ways to true manhood. This is what I see as the stance of both Robert Bly and Sam Kean, two widely read spokesmen in the vanguard of the new movement. In the context of male supremacy, what can true manhood possibly mean? I say again that without looking at the superior power arrogated by men, given to them by their worldwide cultural inheritance, without studying its effects on women, children, the earth, and men themselves, this movement will change nothing. Instead, it will merely create some new design of male privilege. All the materials for thought and action being offered men today, philosophy, poetry, mythology, processes that encourage feeling and intuition, are useful, but do not present the reality in which we live. Male privilege continues to cloud men's vision, until men ask themselves, in what ways do I exploit women, put them down, ignore them? And then move from there to find new understanding, new ways to behave, the men's movement will continue to sleepwalk.
It sounds like she's describing, in a silly way, male ego and gynos.
But is she?
Well, first of all, I like how it's all same bullshit that we've heard a long time ago. That the men were historically oppressing women and using stupid shit. The idea that they use, in religion there's usually male deities, so that's why it was designed specifically to oppress women, or maybe religions were based on common cultural context where rulers were mostly men. So obviously, if you design your universal myth based on normal society, you would make the ruler also male.
Although interestingly,
it's putting an insidious agenda on what men do for
honks.
No,
Honks, you need to switch to voice activity, probably.
Oh, is it cutting out?
Yes.
Okay.
But I took something completely different from this.
That... Alright, I think I'm back now.
I just if you ignore the who made the gods men apart, it's like things men do to please women, to be attractive to women.
Right, it's putting insidious agenda on what men do for women.
Women expect men to do these things, and then nowadays they blame men for doing those things, even though that's what women expect of men. To be attractive. have power. Like, of course, you could just be a bodybuilder and you could be attractive, but in Western culture, the more money and more power you have, the more attractive you are to the women. So I think most of those men don't even realize they do it to gain access to fertile women. But I think that's a big factor.
One thing I wanted to note is there's something that Honks had kind of alluded to, which is that it does seem like this applies very well to gynocentrism. I think that actually does make a lot of sense in light of this. But then also I wanted to note, she hasn't named it yet, but definitely you can see the sort of communist mindset come through, which I know that, you know, the stereotype is I see communists in everyone, like, all the time, but the idea is that she basically thinks that male power just dropped from the sky. She says it comes from like their cultural. Sorry, where was it? Where did she say that? The power is arrogated to men. By their worldwide cultural inheritance. And to me, it's a very feminine way of looking at power, as I just inherited this through the culture and through my family. Whereas from a communist perspective, and of course she hasn't really said this, but I'm going to go ahead and guess, you know, that if a man starts a business and produces things and procures lots of resources, she's going to see that as him somehow just having privilege, like all of that power just fell from the sky.
Yeah, he didn't accumulate it because he wanted to accommodate a family or impress a woman. He just got it from somewhere. He didn't get the motivation from the society that tells men to do these things. And of course they say that's a patriarchy, telling men they should all cry all the time and be weak and everything, but you're not gonna get laid if you listen to feminists. No woman's gonna find you attractive if you fall to this narrative of this modern man.
What does it mean when the male legal ownership of children is essential to patriarchy? Actually, I know this was previous.
Oh.
Is this just some kind of weird argument that it's better for children to be under women? I mean, that sounds natural, but I don't know where the feminist perspective is coming in on that.
Sorry, I accidentally muted us really briefly. I was trying to mute the stupid notifications in Discord, but that also mutes the chat here. I'm just going to have to deal with that later. So those little blips I can't fix right now. But anyway, yeah, on the custody of children, there's a couple of things in play. Like, it used to be related to who is the provider, right? So whenever you had something like a divorce, you know, it would make logical sense for the men to be responsible for the children because he was the one in charge of, you know, all of the finances and providing for the kids. But then what you had post like divorces being more common, they started to have a standard based on the quote-unquote best interest of the child. And under that, I think for a while there was a notion of like having things like shared custody, or that, you know, the man could make an argument that it would go towards him. But eventually it came to be interpreted as just a presumption that the child should stay with the mother. And it was kind of put forth in a very soft way. Ann Cools actually she addressed this in the speech she gave at ICMI 2014. So that's a good reference for some of the history of it. But basically they see the mother's the time that she's spent with the children, it becomes weighted so heavily that there's practically no way for a man who's a traditional caregiver or traditional provider, you know, to have his benefit outweigh, you know, the day-to-day time spent in caregiving activities.
Yeah, because when there was still the economic situation where a man could earn enough to feed a family, he would be outside of the home most of the time and the mother would take care of the children. So back then that was the situation. The mother was the basic caregiver while the man was a provider, and then they established the whole alimony thing, like when you divorce, you have to keep paying, and she has to. They don't really check if she actually keeps providing the human factor. But nowadays, it's still the same in the legal system, while most marriages don't work that way anymore.
Wait, so I just
alimony
want to
kind
check
of-
really quick. Sorry, Honks. Pilleater, I don't know if because you cut out for a little bit because I was being a boomer. So I don't know if that was responsive to your question or not.
No, I was formulating it too. I mean, I was just putting in the perspective that, of course, if you're hostile, that okay, if a guy, because I have I'm friends with this woman where she was divorced, but she doesn't like talking about the kid because the kid is under her ex-husband's custody. And so that's kind of a weird kind of, I see you could have some resentment towards that, but I think that's like a natural motherly thing, though I wouldn't say it's something against men. I'm just trying to put that puzzle together. Where is this feminist argument trying to say that the children should be under the woman's custody? Because from what I know, that's completely normal. It's not like men are perverting that or anything.
What I was going to say was, I think it was just mostly a comment that alimony really kind of like started like getting the divorce thing out of control, because it's literally giving an incentive for women to essentially monkey branch with their hypergamy, because they can get benefits by divorcing. Especially with
your current state of living, because he's forced to keep supplying that.
Yeah, like at least, I mean, child support's kind of bullshit as well, but at least with child support, it was given for the benefit of the child, not necessarily specifically for the mother. So it really started getting out of hand, like the divorce rate, once alimony came into the picture.
Yeah,
In
TFM
fact, I think
calls
it's at 50%.
yeah he calls
Sorry.
the alimony and child support the cash and prizes of divorce, which
It pretty much is.
it pretty much is. You get cash and prizes for your divorce. But yeah, and there is this idea. So in this context, there was a move toward supporting shared parenting, right? So this is what most people within the manosphere want. This is what most people who are kind of more egalitarian minded and kind of the anti-feminist, most of us are saying, you know what, if there's going to be a divorce and there's children involved, the presumption should be shared parenting, right? Some kind of 50-50, make an arrangement, right? And then unless there's some, some reason, right? Some sort of abuse, some sort of extenuating like circumstances, then you consider exclusive custody. And that's what these feminists in this book don't want. They see that as male supremacy. So a presumption of 50-50 custody, unless there's some kind of, unfitness or some kind of abuse involved, that's seen as male supremacy. And this is like kind of, it's very typical of these conversations where, the men's rights activists are kind of just saying, how about some of this, care and concern directed at women? Can we try to make this more even? Whereas it seems like from the feminist perspective, unless they get all of it, then they're going to always view it as male supremacy. Of course, coming from me, it's obviously biased.
That's
That's
a
how
Karen
I see it.
Strawn story. Like I saw this video by Karen Strawn about her divorce, where her lawyer advised her to claim that he abused her and the children, so she would get everything. And she was opposed to that because they just had drifted apart, and she still liked the guy. She didn't love him anymore. But the lawyer, he just wanted to win the best case possible, saying, hey, just tell them that he abused you, You're going to get everything you want. No shared custody, all the money.
That's
Yeah,
pretty disgusting.
Family law is just like notoriously ugly for that reason. I'm trying to think. Yeah, so basically what she's saying here is she just thinks that, like with Robert Bly and with this early men's movement, a lot of it was focused on men finding ways to heal themselves. And I think that basically because she doesn't view any form of male power as legitimate, she thinks that men basically stole it, or it was gifted to them unfairly. And because she doesn't see any kind of relationship based on merit, she sees this assertion of like healing men as men basically becoming even stronger and taking even more for themselves. That's kind of my takeaway from how she's set this up here.
Yeah, it feels like men should just suffer and die, but probably not die, just give money.
And Gleb,
I don't really
just wanted to
understand
make
how-
sure,
what- how
I
she-
noticed that your thing lighted up a few times. Your mic's still working, right?
Oh, you talking to me?
No, I was talking to Glebs. Just because I saw it light up, I'm not
Oh.
sure if it was echo or if it was...
Hmm.
Before the stream it was working. But if you're trying to talk, I'm not able to hear it. So if necessary, hop in and out. But it might just be background noise. And Hawk, did you have some thoughts before I go on to the next page here?
I don't really completely understand why she views it as male supremacy, though. Like, I don't really understand like what in her worldview allows her to think that's like.
Yeah,
logical.
it's kind of taken as a presumed given, because I guess the feminists they're not really making the case from the bottom up. They're kind of like writing articles. I think basically for other feminists, it's called "Women Respond to the Men's Movement." But I get the sense that most of these essays are written in a very insular kind of sense, and it may just be that they kind of perceive that only other feminists are really interested in criticizing the movement. But yeah, they don't really make the case from the bottom up. They just kind of assume that women are oppressed, and the notion of even questioning that is completely foreign to them. Which, to anyone in the 90s, it would be foreign.
Yeah, but they're actually doing what feminists are doing right now. They are taking the presumption, like the assumption of what they think is the truth, and they work back from that and look for proof. They don't look for actual fact. They look for what suits their narrative.
Yeah, well, and it's a big pill to swallow. The fact that basically the entire women's movement was based on sophistry and entitlement. That's like that. There's hardly any redeeming quality of it. Hey, Gloves, go ahead and test your mic now.
Oh,
Yeah.
hello everyone. I had computer issues, had to reboot.
Hello.
Oh, okay, yeah.
Welcome back.
Did you have any thoughts on the first chunk of this here before I go on to the next page?
No, let's go on.
All right, let's keep on keeping on. A man trying to understand male supremacy in greater depth and to forge new ways of being would do well to add to his reading some books that appeared in the early 1970s discussion of men's liberation. Who's one of the guests? She's going to bring up John Stoltenberg. Men speaking for the movement of that time, who were studying men's psyche and behavior, had been inspired by the women's movement. They opened their thinking to what women were telling them of their experiences as they lived their lives, the insult, humiliation, fear, and contempt that women faced in the world of male privilege. Given the suffering and pain women were describing, these men sought conclusions about what they must learn and do in order to change society. Current literature avoids this practical approach to confronting male supremacy. In Iron John, Robert Bly faults those men who listened and responded to women. He says men became soft, and insists that softness cannot equal true masculinity. This feminist way, according to Bly, is not going to help men to know true manliness. That lies elsewhere. The way to manhood is through warriorhood, the ability to be fierce. Although Bly attempts to differentiate between the warrior tempered by tenderness and the savage, many have responded negatively to this word, with its military implication, and certainly the word can easily be misunderstood by women living under the threat and reality of male violence. Just how warriorhood is to be expressed and then disciplined is not clear. Bly's book is full of poetry and mythic stories that capture the mind and can be very stimulating for those who haven't been exposed to mining the psychological meaning in fairy tales and myths. However, its vagueness will keep it from becoming a transforming book for men, as Simone de Beauvoir's Second Sex was for women. An experiential clarity is needed. Perhaps Bly's workshops provide this. I turn to Sam Keene's Fire in the Belly with hope and interest. In the first part of this book, Keene tells us how he found that fire in the belly as he faced the necessity of ending his relation with a much younger woman that began soon after his divorce. This story illustrates my contention that Keene is unaware of how he is caught in the thrall of male supremacy. All the many good things he has to say lose force because they are in the shadow of this thrall, and he does not know it. He tells the story. Okay, so before we go on to the Sam Keene story here, I don't know, does anyone feel that she has clarified what she means by male supremacy, and I guess how she thinks that the men's movement ought to proceed? I guess she didn't really clarify on any kind of definition of it, but basically I guess she's saying that if there's going to be a men's movement, it should be about responding to the problems that women have said that they have. And, like, I'm not opposed to that in principle, but, you know, just like the women's movement focusing on women's issues has a reciprocal where we also have a movement that focuses on issues particular to men, it'd be kind of interesting to see an approach to feminism that's based on, I guess, men claiming that they have problems and responding to it in a way that's actually kind of constructive and sensitive rather than, you know, complaining about the man flu and, you know, disparaging men and making all incels out to be serial killers and stuff like that.
Yeah, all it takes you to be an incel is not being confident and attractive. That doesn't mean you want to kill all Chads and Stacies.
If you have $200, you're not an incel, essentially. It's
Yeah,
mostly a meme that's been like pushed by feminists, I think.
But I really find it weird how she ended that paragraph like, oh, he took a younger woman. Like that's some, you could see that as as a sense of envy that older men can have access to younger women and maybe even procreate until they're 70, 80.
Right, but then she never looks into the why they do that. Like, they never ask why, and that's the problem. They never ask these questions. For example, the reason why men usually date younger women is because it takes longer for them to attract women due to hypergamy. So they need to get some resources, which will obviously take years and years, but once they do, then they can attract younger women. So, like, there's a caveat to it, obviously.
Yeah, I mean, if you're very young, unless you're very smart and get successful at a very young age, when you're very young, it's only being attractive that gets you a woman. Basically, being charming and being attractive. And that shit's gonna wane off. Like, you're not gonna stay the top of the crop when it comes to physical attractiveness. So men strive to have physical or monetary property that will attract women because of the safety that it provides for the progeny.
Yeah, and there's definitely a double standard here where, from a feminist perspective, like a sex-positive one, if you see a younger woman going after an older man who, you know, has lots of wealth, you know, she's hustling, right? She's getting her bag. She's, you know, whatever. Or you know, that's her preference. That's the relationship she wants, right? So we shouldn't be shaming her for any of her choices. But then the man in that relationship is seen as an exploiter when it's kind of like just each party of that relationship bringing whatever they want to bring to it.
Yeah.
I saw this retarded meme on Twitter once, which was drawing attention to the fact that Leonardo's DiCaprio's girlfriends have all been no older than 25, and it said something like, the age of 25 is when the brain finishes maturing, and Leo won't date anyone older than 25. Coincidence? Basically insinuating that he's dating them because their brains are underdeveloped and he's manipulating them. But I mean, if they really want to make the argument that women are mentally basically like children until the age of 25, I mean, you know.
Yeah, we shouldn't allow them to vote until they are 25, right?
Yeah.
Well, I
today's
maintain
dangerous
very
because-
strongly that nobody should have the right to vote.
Well, today's dangerous is because today women, especially millennial girls at 25 or some of the younger ones, let's talk about the bad ones that had so much promiscuous sex or treated their body badly that at a point where how can they be motherly material? You have to be making a huge sacrifice to forgive all their sins and somehow settle down at 25, 26 for a 35-year-old who's interested in that. I don't know what, but seems
Don't
pretty
forget the studies that say that after 7 sexual partners, the chance of staying in a long-term relationship for a woman decreases to like 20%.
Yeah, I'm curious as to why that is, honestly.
Well, it's probably because it's not that the more sex she has, the more promiscuous she becomes. It's just that if she is more likely to.
It's a selection effect.
It's not a cause. It's not symptom isn't the right word. But you get what I'm trying to say.
Being that promiscuous is a symptom of a certain psychological personality type, I think.
I see.
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah, like at one point I remember Molyneux had put it where he's like he was saying like dicks are poison or something, right? But like I think that that's not exactly accurate. I think that it's just kind of a sign of something kind of underlying it.
Well, mine isn't poison, and nobody has ever get poisoned from it. So yeah.
Well, I mean, you
fake
get
news.
poison from it, but different kind of poison.
I get that. I was trying to make a silly joke.
Oh, sorry.
Yeah, but the objective, like just if a woman or a man has this many partners, this person might have had a lot of wealth. This person might have been in great shape. This person might have been very tall, which you like. This person might have had that. The more partners you have, the more your Prince Charming in your head becomes like the culmination of all of those things. That's like one theory. Like, you can't live up to all of those guys that came before you. There's something you're going to be lacking.
I see. Okay, that's interesting. Yeah.
Hypergamy approach. That's
or maybe
also-
it's just because she's so eager to change partners. It's like she will never be satisfied no matter what. Who knows?
It's possible. The studies into that are very far in between. Like if a real scientist wants to study that, he risks his reputation, because you can't look into that without being called a misogynist.
All of those studies are correlational, though. Like, I think I've seen studies showing that the more sexual partners a woman has, the more likely she is to be mentally unstable or report mental issues. It's not because the sex causes the psychological issues, though. It's because women who have, well, as you were saying, women who want that amount of sexual partners have a certain psychological profile, which is
Or
apparent.
more likely, it's like the same reason why certain people who suffer from certain mental health issues are more likely to engage in recreational drug use. Because when your mind is unbalanced, you seek something to soothe the mental pain.
Yeah,
Like the reverse. If you have been addicted to like 4 different drugs, you're probably not. The problem's probably not the drugs. The problem's probably you.
Yeah, exactly. That's kind of the same. This, everything that's pleasurable is pretty much going through the dopamine subsystem. So, be it drugs, be it sexual depravity, be it other, everything that stimulates your dopamine subsystem. Certain types of personalities, they're more likely to engage in those activities with reckless abandon.
There might be various reasons why that is. I had one ex-girlfriend who told me when I got serious with her that she hadn't slept alone in a bed for more than 5 days since she was 14. Like, every time she broke up, she got a new guy in less than a week. And I think that's some psychological problem of not being able to be alone, not something like dopamine or whatever. It's that was just some psychological shit, if you ask me. But a lot
But
of people have
why?
that problem.
Why doesn't she want to be alone? It's because it's you might say that my views are reductionist, and nowadays the term behaviorism is kind of a bad word, but still it all comes down to electrochemical reactions in the brain.
Yeah,
And again, I know it's reductionist, but yeah.
No, but there's some truth in that.
The fact that it was apparently that easy for her to get new partners, it also kind of draws attention to the fact that practically all men have to go through large chunks of their life being alone, whereas very few women do. And yeah.
Yeah, she was very attractive. Like, she's still modeling, and of course she didn't have any trouble finding a new guy. It's just she didn't.
Even if
Yeah,
she
she
was
gets
just
the SMV up front.
even if she was just average, though, it probably wouldn't be nowhere near as difficult as it is for the average guy.
Yeah, of course. It's just I could completely believe that she didn't take more than a week to find a new guy. I just felt like that was very toxic to her own psyche, because that's just the next best guy, you know?
Actually, this kind of ties into. I wanted to mention just a few of the comments Macho Gomez had left in the live chat. The first one was pretty much everyone lives those things, and I think he's referring to the insult, humiliation, fear, and contempt that women face in the world of male privilege. He says, well, everyone experiences those. Of course, the feminist response to that is, yeah, because patriarchy hurts men too. And don't you know, if we would just set aside half of all seats in Congress for women, we'll live in a world that doesn't have these things. Because all you have to do is look at feminist Twitter, and you can see it's a world of no humiliation or pain or insults, right?
No, they're not looking for the tiniest thing to get upset about. No, it would be a perfect world.
And then this was also interesting. So he says, if I remember, incel was first coined by a woman. I haven't heard that. I think most of us weren't aware of the term incel until Elliot Rodger. And the popular narrative is that it's a term that people within like that community online kind of label themselves. Right? That's the popular narrative. I haven't heard of that, but that's very interesting if that's true. I don't know. Has anyone heard of this idea that incel was coined by a woman?
No, I haven't actually.
I certainly heard this term long before Elliot Rodger, and it was from a feminist. She was like, "Oh, you're incel." I had to look it up what it meant.
Really?
Well,
involuntary celibate.
Were using that as an insult before Elliot Rodger.
Yeah.
Because I mean, the only community I know is the incel wiki, and they usually before then they used to hang out on Reddit, and people like r/Harriet.
The term was definitely around before that guy went crazy.
Pre-2014, they had an incel wiki, and they would call men incels and make fun of them this way and use it as an insult. Really?
Yeah, it was kind of the insult. It's like I remember a time when alpha, beta, delta was a normal MGTOW kind of way in the sexual hierarchy, and it was perfectly okay to be beta. And then all of a sudden, in the past 2 years,
feels like
all of a sudden, out of nowhere, so being a beta was somehow evil, that you were everything wrong is somehow being beta, and now it became popular consensus where Blair White is calling, or Jesse Lee whatever is calling people beta, and it's kind of lost its...
Wait, did you meant to say Jesse Lee Peterson, but then you accidentally said Blair White? Did that just happen?
No, Blair White did say it, and I was going to say Jesse Lee Peterson.
Like he said it, like, beta!
Yeah, to that destiny. And I actually almost said 2,000 years ago. I'm like, why did I say that? I meant 2 years ago.
Yeah, but that's actually my personal experience. Well, I have two friends who I would call beta today, because they were raised in the same way I was raised, believing none of our mothers were feminists. We were just raised to be respectful and kind of take ourselves back, not be a macho. Like, all of these things were just nobody told us don't be a macho. It was just like the way we were raised. And those two guys, one of them only had toxic relationships with controlling bitches, and the other is a wizard.
Well, I had one too. I mean, I had a very bad toxic relationship when I was 21, and by all definitions, somebody would call me beta. But I've written an article like two years ago about why it's okay to be a beta, and somehow in MGTOW tradition, the word beta now means you're like evil and that you shouldn't be beta. It's kind of like the whole soy boy thing. Well, there is legitimate truth to being soy boy, where you have a beard, open mouth, glasses, you like video games.
Yeah.
This normie cliche, and it is very annoying. But beta, are you talking about the norms and values of being a good Christian or someone like something like that?
It's like I realize the respectful way to treat a woman that people were raised around me in my circles is considered beta these days. Well, I think that's like I think the women didn't evolve in the same way that the generation of men I was born into evolved. I only got laid after I learned how to be a dick. Like, not be a complete asshole, if you know what I mean, but just be assertive and
That game.
You have to kind of act against your better instincts of being nice and respectful, which is the end result of
it
the
goes like
cultural
this.
development.
If you want sex, you demand it by using your body. That's pretty much it. When the girl assumes that sex is coming, but when? And you, supposedly through, typical Roosh v. game knowledge, whatever they're spewing today, you use, and then, sex comes. But the thing is, though, that we're such rational and intellectual that, it's normal for a guy to think of Nietzsche and logic and intellectualism. And the woman is like, why aren't you talking about me or putting me in a romance novel, right? It's okay to be an artist and an interesting introvert.
Don't treat me like an equal. Treat me the way I want to be treated instinctively.
And that's where supposedly Roosh V's game knowledge comes in, even though in a time where Roosh has clearly said his game book is meant to lay with easy women. It's an easy way to lay with easy women because intellectual women would stop you from gaming them, really. Because they would understand that. I mean, it's like this. We're also reaching a point where all of a sudden this knowledge of seducing women is almost inflated, and where it almost becomes in itself a type of tool to basically objectify women and to continue promiscuous sex among women that actually need reform and rehabilitation, but instead men are just replying to pump and dump. And this is, I think, of the behalf on women. It's not this coach red pill. Why are women so promiscuous? It's more like men using game to have sex with easy women and can keep continuing it, kind of like going to the 7-Eleven and picking up groceries or something. Instead, you're going on Tinder and finding easy women. And then all of a sudden, it just becomes this kind of dysfunction, regression towards society where there's no spiritual self saying, why don't I just long-term this woman?
Yeah, but that's all going back to the OkCupid study, where they basically found out that 20% of men are deemed above average by the women, and I think it was 80% of women are deemed above average by men on OkCupid, which is probably true on all dating platforms, which ultimately leads to the 20% most attractive men having access to 100% of the women. While 80% of the men
it's
are
not just like
not.
the
But we're
most
kind of
attractive
veering
men who
into
can find
it.
these easy women. I think that's part of it too, though. So that's kind of why it's so revolutionary. But honestly, I think that gay men should put easy women on blast for cultural appropriation. that is our culture. That is our culture.
Mm-hmm. There's a term I heard. It was called inpri. It's kind of esoteric, but instead of involuntary celibate, it's involuntary promiscuous. And it could be said to basically men or millennial men who feel that it's almost natural, have been told it's natural to have sex with 10 different girls. And then when you're the magical age of 36, then you find some girl on Tinder and get married or something like that. And so what do you call someone who actually wants to long-term and marry some sleazy or promiscuous woman, but it's involuntary promiscuity, which sounds almost the opposite of incel.
Yeah,
It doesn't really catch on, but
well, intro, I guess that's just
there was I think there was this Netflix special. Like, You'll Always Be My Maybe. I didn't see it, but people told me about it and said it's basically a guy waiting for the chick to settle down with him, unless she finds a better guy. That's actually a thing on Netflix. Like,
well, I think it's really all just boils down to the economy and basically men. I think it's almost at this point where, yes, women, I mean, it sounds like an alt-right meme of white Sharia law, that you have to Sharia women or thought patrol them. Sounds really goofy as hell. But at the same time, it's almost this point where I do believe there is some responsibility on the man's behalf to basically overcome this through his own maturity and realize that at a certain time that, you know, you have to have children or something and have the heteronormative life. But it's so weird today with feminism, post-capitalism, and all this materialism going on, is people say, why settle? You could just be promiscuous in this market and believe in this kind of fake masculinity and whatnot.
I was shunned from the
picking up your
social
mouse
circle.
clicks, so you should switch to push to talk or mute if you're clicking on stuff, or adjust the sensitivity or whatever. You sound like a grasshopper.
Who?
Honks.
Oh, me?
Yeah.
Shit.
Yeah,
Okay, hold on.
Your clicks. Click, 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 click.
Me.
I just do push
Go
to
back
talk.
to push to talk, yeah. Ashley asked me to take it off, so.
Oh,
You
I
can't
forgot what I
win.
wanted to say.
Okay,
Alright,
it's on push to talk now.
Let's go back to the book, I guess, because
so the next
we're
part
rambling.
I like that turn though, impro. That's very funny. I like it just because it's it mirrors incel and like sex addict is so heavy. But you know, if someone's involuntarily promiscuous, I think that probably fits the bar for being a sex addict.
Because if you're a sex addict, you're addicted to sex, and all you have to do is stop being addicted. But involuntary promiscuous means I want to settle down, I want to get married, but I get with all these girls, we have one night stands, I try my best to be a good guy, and then she leaves me because.
Okay, I now remember my point. Like, a guy I know, he's very good on Tinder. Like, he's a master. He has mastered the basic rules of how to get them into bed and how to get them to like him. And every time I talk to him in real life, he seems kind of sad. Like, he brags about his latest accomplishments, like, oh, she had this big of a butt, she had this big of titties, and he never sounds like he's happy about this. Like, he has to prove it to his bros that he's
involuntary promiscuous.
This might have to do with the male I think it's the male love hormone. I think it's called vasopressin. Basically, when the more you have sex with someone, like especially with men, having sex is important in a relationship.
For bonding?
Helps. Yeah, for bonding, definitely. And the more they have, essentially, the more they have sex with this woman, the more they have feelings for them. So pumping and dumping isn't really healthy for men either, because they're going to try and bond with it. They're going to bond with this woman because of vasopressin. They're going to have a vasopressin bond with this. And TFM actually talked about this a lot because he actually has a vasopressin bond with Celestina. But yeah, it obviously works with women as well. So
I mean, that's absolutely true. I mean, I have post-traumatic stress disorder of a few exes. Well, I used to have PTSD of this old ex, but now I have a PTSD of a previous ex of 2 years ago. But it's true. What happens is sex is really bonding. It really creates a connection, and it's really ungrateful on the ex's part to basically treat it as not something special or interesting, but actually just a vacation or something. Like, you're going on a vacation to Florida or California, and sex can be like that. And what it does is it devalues people. Doesn't realize that it's sacred and bonding, and
but
that's something more.
What it sounds to me when he talks like he sometimes bangs chicks that he connects with. Like, he really like they might have had a connection, a relationship, but he's disgusted by the fact it was so easy to get in bed with her. If you know what I mean. He
was the one
standard
who.
mode.
That's the funny.
but-
that's the ironic part.
Like he used his basic modus operandi, and got her in bed in less than 3 days. Just writing messages, and then they fucked him. And
Yeah, but does it do anything
I
like
kinda-
after that?
I
That's it.
kind of get how that could disillusion you. Like, even if it turns out to be a person that you connect on a psychological level with, it was also a person you could get in bed with some easy catchphrases. It kind of devalues the whole experience. And
Oh yeah, I
guess-
mean, there's text game now. Text game is more important than physical game today. If you can go on Tinder or like Instagram and like text a girl, then within 10 texts, and if she really likes you, you can be like, want to meet on 2 days later from when you're texting from 7 to 9 at this bar. And depending if you want to go, well, it's really risky to do game in one night. It's usually you kiss her on the first night and then you do it in bed with her the second night. But this is goofy. I mean, some people
Yeah,
will go,
but feminism tells those women that it's empowering to fuck them on the first night because
oh yeah, and then that's like, well, it leads to the Roosh V types to basically pump and dump. And so that's what I'm saying. It's like the feminist
it
thinks,
reduces the respect that you have for those women because you kind of pumped and dumped, and then you talk to them on the breakfast and you realize you had a lot in common and you could be a couple, but it didn't take you much effort to fuck her. Like,
yeah, I mean, it's less like you have to question that this is both the feminist saying there's a male rapist after me, even though consenting to it. And at the same time, there's the man that's being led on this kind of PUA game corruption that's happening and saying, well, it's all about having sex with lots and lots of women until I'm considered a playboy and I'm a man. And so there's kind of dysfunctionalities on both sides of the spectrum. I think it's kind of sad to assume that's all the women. I think the man...
no, it's technology that fucks with all of us.
Mhm.
In my when I had my first real honest and long-lasting relationship, I established that over the internet, but not over a dating platform, just over a forum where you could share common interests, and we happen to live kind of near to one another, and yeah, it wasn't about pump and dump or fuck us and go on. And these days there's so many opportunities, people just default to that, I think. And
I mean,
devalues the human connection.
Mhm.
This
I
actually,
actually-
might. Oh, sorry. Go ahead.
No, I was just saying I've actually talked to this with my friends. I think one of my future books I want to release in 2020 or 2021 is actually a game book. I'm actually thinking about writing a book about not per se how to pick up women, but about relationships in general. I think that's a very hot topic to discuss today, where we're now thinking of game. We talk about relationships as quote unquote game, which seems to be more of what women look as a date rape Bible, but rather this conversation between modern millennial and Zoom relationships or something.
Actually, I did. I ordered your book on ludism because because I like games, but also since I teach, I'm kind of wondering if I'm going to be able to comb through it and find things that I can take away that I can translate into like a pedagogical sense.
Chinese.
So I'm really
Well,
looking
I don't
forward-
know any
You
Chinese.
described it as a pamphlet, right? So then I thought, wait a minute, is this some bullshit where it's like 15 pages or something? And I'm like, no, it's like that's a proper.
No, it's actually 35,000 words.
Yeah, I was gonna say it's like a proper hundreds of pages book, So
Well, a pamphlet in political sense just means an introduction.
I guess
mean,
when
a
I hear
pamphlet is
pamphlet, I
supposed to
just
be
think of like a little thing that you hand out.
Yeah. Well, the
Yeah.
books are meant to be handout. I mean, I have copies at home where I hand it out to people, and in definition, yes, that's a pamphlet. And the purpose of a pamphlet is to get that information across immediately, even though it might be, say,
Do you have a
35,000 words
part
long.
2 in mind? Like,
Part-
like a continuation of that one. Like,
Well, Spacepan's talking about. I wrote a book on board games, and actually, my graduate thesis is kind of based around a particular designer, and the Ludism book was just meant as kind of this punk rock zine of some sort, and it was just an experiment. My graduate thesis is going to be more professional, more about bibliography, about this German designer I really like, and about the modern scene in which I'm doing research on. But no, as for the dating thing, that was actually an ideal I had. And when I was actually in Los Angeles with my friend Robert and Matt, I was thinking maybe the book would be called How to Do Sexy Time, and it'd be like a comic book or something really bizarre, where it's like you're talking about relationships, but this relationship isn't so much like Rushdie's Game, which I read start to finish, but rather it's about what it's not a how-to, but maybe a relationship book about like what the criticism of it and what needs to be done between young men and women or something like that. But I don't see many of those books out at the moment. So
I'm just really on the tangent of that because I have had some weird conversations with women who were friendly with me, not relationship women, but there was in German there was a group they called them Verein Nacht, like a group of 8, which was also a pun about for one night, für eine Nacht. And these were young women, like 16, encouraging each other to have one-night stands. And I've had a lot of experiences in my puberty years with women who, in my opinion, have made bad decisions of dating or fucking older men or random men.
You know, my current
and also, I'm sorry to interrupt, but also another thing that I noticed, especially during my high school years, middle school, was, you know how women, girls start puberty before boys, and I noticed these girls would actually like basically sexually assault these like prepubescent boys sometimes because they've been taught that sex.
Yeah.
Honks, hold the talk key down all the time while you're speaking.
Basically, these girls have been taught that sex is so normal, and so, you know, it should be like a free thing. That basically they've been like, I noticed that, for example, my friend was sexually assaulted by an older girl in high school. She grabbed him by his crotch, and he was only like 12 at the time, and he didn't know what to do. But I noticed this, and I actually was kind of shocked at this, and it's only really coming back to me now that, you know, it's so obvious that these girls are being taught that sex should be so, you know, carefree and like, you know, whatever, like from a very early age.
Yeah, but my takeaway was more like I talked to some promiscuous girls when I was like 13, 14 in my class, and what I recognize is the ones that made bad decisions, in my opinion, might not have been bad decisions by their own judgment. They advised the other girls to do the same. They kind of, my interpretation was always they didn't want to be alone in that experience of feeling that way. So instead of dealing with it, they just told their friends to do the same so they wouldn't be alone. And I experienced that a lot, and realized my oldest sister, was doing that same thing before I was old enough to realize it. And it's all about the cultural standard. Like, if you make this normal, like, oh, it's so empowering to fuck older men, it's so empowering to be sexually promiscuous, you're actually creating a toxic environment for women, for girls, where they are led to doing bad decisions by their peers. Like, for me, it was like my peers tried to get me to smoke. I smoke these days, but I didn't start because of them. But yeah.
Yeah, there's a lot of talk of male responsibility to keep women safe, but I think there is also part of it where it's like, also women should be guiding each other, which is funny because a lot of what Robert Bly talks about is kind of men guiding each other and protecting each other. And I think that if these women were responding to his men's movement, and instead of saying, oh, you're trying to protect men and heal men and make them more powerful, and that's going to lead to more male supremacy, I wonder how much better things could be if instead they had looked at this message and thought, could we be kind of nurturing and supporting girls in a way that's kind of constructive?
Don't
and
make the
beneficial for
mistakes that
everyone?
I made. I wish they told them I made this mistake.
Yeah.
Don't do what I did.
It's like
but
they
did
can't
the
admit those
opposite.
mistakes. It's kind of... Anyway. I think that
Sorry,
the next
Ron,
part
I
of
have
this...
to clock out for today.
Oh, okay.
It's kind of...
Well, hey, it was nice having you in here again, because it's been a few weeks, and you're kind of... You're one of the more common guests we have on here, too. So it's like it's not the same stream without you.
Well, thanks for inviting me. See you next time.
Absolutely.
Have a
Keep on
good
keeping
time.
on. Alright, and then the next part of this I think actually might tie into some of this talk about relationships and things like that, so we'll see. We left off where she was going to be reading from a fairly large excerpt from Sam Keen's book, which I'm not familiar with Sam Keen. I'm a little bit familiar with Robert Bly, but not Sam Keen, but presumably they're kind of in a similar vein. So I guess this is him talking about his relationship with a younger woman, which this feminist, Harriet Gill, is going to claim really puts a light on this book that, I don't know, that makes it not... that kind of, I guess, tarnishes his whole message. Let's see. She writes, to free himself from the need for this woman, he walked the hills of San Francisco on an extended drunk until his being turned liquid. He chooses this moment to phone her. She has already rejected him more than once, and says grandly, I know it is time for you to go. As much as I want to be with you, I know there is no way for us to remain lovers. I am too old and too raw to be casual about love, and you are too young to be faithful and make graceful commitments. Go without deception or guilt. I love you. Goodbye. I appreciate Keen's honesty, but I find the story romanticized fiction. Who is he to say what her capabilities for commitment are when his own marriage has recently ended? He confesses as well to quickly starting another affair as he began to grow insecure with this younger woman. This story sets the tone for the unconscious male privilege that is everywhere expressed in his book. Another example. Suffering after his divorce, Keen seeks the counsel of his mentor, Reverend Howard Thurman, who tells him, there are two questions a man must ask himself. First, where am I going? And second, who will go with me? Keen says that this counsel was the most important bit of advice he ever got about being a man. These questions proclaim that the life that is to be lived in marriage will be the man's life. But does Keen know, has he heard, that many women today are asking, where is my own journey, my own fulfillment? While he claims to be aware of the contemporary status of women, Keen seems to reject the most vital parts of feminist thinking where he would find this included. Keen includes in his book a set of questions that men can ask themselves in order to know where they presently stand. Included are the following. What pleasures and privileges do you enjoy as a man? What is hardest about being a man? If pursued, these two questions might open a man's serious thinking to what male privilege means to him. Male supremacy is hidden especially in that question, what is hardest about being a man? Keen's questions can be useful if answered in depth, but as stated, they cover too much ground. I have some questions myself, but mine are more specific. Alright, so before we get into, I guess, what her alternative questions are, any thoughts on her treatment of Sam Keen here? I mean, in general, it's hard to say just because if we haven't read his book, I'm not able to comment on whether or not this is fair or unfair or whatever. Based on what she's shown, I guess I don't really have much of an objection, like taking it at face value. But it's kind of like a whole lot of who cares,
Yeah, I don't really have much to comment on that as well either.
Yeah, I mean, I guess there's this point where he's talking about, you have a younger woman and an older man, and his comment was that he's what was it? Too old and too raw to be casual, yet she's too young to be faithful and graceful in commitments. I don't think this is that controversial of a statement in a general sense, But of course, this
It depends
writer
on his
really takes
impression.
issue with that. She really doesn't like that he implied that, like, who are you to say that she can't be a young, faithful woman? And, sure, hashtag not all it, right? And, like, yeah, she's going to say, oh, well, you had another affair, so you were unfaithful, so who are you to say? And it's like, okay, yeah, maybe.
He might have been unfair to that woman. He might have been.
Yeah, no,
Yeah,
it sounds
like-
like he was. It sounds like it was just a shit show all around, But then it's making me
Like,
wonder, like,
maybe
okay, so
just
I
a
have
big
this
excuse.
author, this author who I don't, like, why do I care what she thinks? And then, like, this other author she's quoting, who, like, why do I care what he thinks?
No, it's plausible, but on the other hand, like that's basically where my father put his faith. Like he was 13 years older than my mother. He got to know her when she was 18, and they were faithful to each other. At least she was faithful to him until he died. I don't know if he actually cheated, but there were some instances. But it sounds like projection. He might not have good opinion of women, or he might have been already in that generation where you feel like, oh, young women they need to fuck around for a bit to know what they want. Like that was the spirit of the day. Everybody needs to fuck around to know what they want. I'm not sure if that was the great take on human civilization, but that was the spirit of the time. If this is what risen in 1992, if you know what I mean.
I guess, no, yeah, and that kind of makes sense, and I can see how that kind of puts a light on the relationship, as I guess a case study. But again, that just the idea of that is just it's too
Women were
anecdotal
very
for my
encouraged.
taste, The whole
Yeah, but women were very encouraged to be promiscuous and experience all kinds of experiences after the pill was invented. That was a thing for a long time. Like everybody assumed that you kind of had to rub your horns off or something.
Yeah, and the logic, of course, was that it took away the major disadvantage of being promiscuous, which was, the childbirth. Or I guess it was even just raising children, just their responsibility. I guess
it also
the
sounds
other
like
part
he
of
was
it,
just running away from that relationship and using excuses. So like we won't know even if we read his book. It's just
right,
his
because
take.
even then we're just getting his selective story of it. I guess
Exactly.
the other big takeaway from this one is she talks about, so he's presented these questions, and they're supposed to be important questions for kind of figuring out the male experience, and with his approach to men's issues, they were important ones. And she says the most important thing to consider to understand male supremacy is his question: what is hardest about being a man? And I guess at this point it's too nebulous to make any conclusion, but does anyone see how, where maybe she might be trying to link an answer to that question to male supremacy? Or on the converse, like, do you think that in answering this question, there's something kind of useful or constructive when it comes to men's issues?
I'm under the impression that she was being selective about choosing the source because she could use it to prove her point. Like, I don't know how many books she read by random guys, but really sounds like it's just confirmation bias.
Yeah, I agree with first. It does sound like that.
Okay. So
Nobody
just
else?
checking a couple of messages.
I would have loved to hear other opinions. Sorry, Spaceman. I didn't want to cut you off. I just
No,
hoped
we're good.
more people would chime on. Like Ashley, Gay Bomb, Pilleater.
Well, did anyone else have anything for this section, or should we just go ahead and move to the next part of it?
Yeah, give it like
I say we just move on.
Yeah.
Yeah, this part I think was just, there's not as much to comment on, I guess.
Yeah,
move
if
on.
nobody has an input, let's move on.
Okay, so the next part. So these are her counter questions because I think maybe now she's finally going to explain to us what she means by male supremacy. You know, she named this essay "Men's Predicament: Male Supremacy." So let's see if she can present a coherent version of what she means by male supremacy, and then link this to men's issues. So, well, I guess drum roll. I think this is where she'll clarify it.
Imagine Paul Joseph Watson's shock.
Yeah,
Please,
we'll see.
imagine it.
No, it was funny. I actually, Bernie Chapin was streaming, and I mentioned this book to him, and that like he should totally comment on it. And he's like, "You couldn't pay me anything to listen to that awful garbage. I'm sure it's just a bunch of communism." And like, it was just funny
It
because
does
he
hurt
was
my
totally
brain.
right. Like, yeah, I'm reading through it, and it is just a bunch of communism.
But it's also kind of refreshing to feel this pain from this very fresh take on what is common feminist propaganda these days. Like it was new back then, so we're witnessing history, I think.
Yeah, I mean, in the first sentence of this essay, she had the word problematic. You know, there's a lot of it's a funny kind of like it feels antiquated, yet it's all so much the same as what we always see. So I do think it's very valuable to go through. But anyway,
Exactly.
I think I've
It
poisoned
hurts
the
my
well
brain,
enough. We'll
but
see where she goes with this.
yeah,
I would-
it hurts my brain. But it's very interesting to know that this was published in 1992.
Yeah, exactly. This whole conflict did not come into existence in like 2012 or whatever. It's been a thing. And I guess even from their perspective, it was old at their time. You know, they're tired of it in 1992.
They thought it was their time,
They thought
but
it was-
they
yeah.
realized it was not, and they waited patiently, and now they're fucking up society. And it's great to know where they came from.
All right. She says, I would ask men to examine their personal definition of themselves. For example, a man could ask, why do I think sexual harassment of women is my right? Has it ever occurred to me that I think this way? Am I uncomfortable in the face of female authority? Why? Does my attitude toward women in the workplace need to change? Why do I think that what I do and say is more important than what women do and say? Why do I monopolize conversations with women, leaving them practically no space to respond? Why do I, without a second thought, expect personal services from women? Housework, cooking, childcare, valet service, erranding. Why do I expect a woman to defer to me, to give me the lion's share of the spending time, and more coddling than I deserve? Do I ever think of sharing my prerogative of making the first social move? Why am I so often taciturn, unresponsive, dour, unlistening? Why is it that I do not take women seriously? How am I unfair, hard-hearted, even cruel? In what ways do I exploit women? How can I change these things about myself? Do I wish to? Have I been justifying my exploitation of women? These questions could help men look male supremacy squarely in the eye. To speak of men as though they constitute a monolith would be misleading. We all share attributes that make up human character. Some men are sweet, patient, and kind, as some women are not. But what has descended on all of us is an automatic expectation that a man's behavior will act out his male supremacist assumptions, and that a woman will respond to in the fact of them, depending on the painful learning and unlearning she has gone through. In my own response to male supremacy, I ask myself to look at it carefully. I live surrounded by it. I can respond to it in a number of ways: accepting, adapting, avoidance, withdrawal, not noticing, or straight-on confrontation. Within me there is fear, constricted ideas of where I can go, what I can do, and what I can say. The confidence that is part of my temperament has been in the past pushed to the wall by male supremacy. It lives again and grows in the nurturance of the women's movement and its sisterhood. So
Wowie.
basically, yeah, there was a lot of, you know,
Oh.
she dialed it back with a little not all men there, right at the end.
But
But
fuck,
man, these
man,
questions, how
she
great.
really grasped the whole human interaction, like the whole human nature that
That's it. That's
exists.
it. We got to the bottom
But
of
she
it.
drew the
Okay,
fucking
I'm gonna
wrong.
actually zoom in on these questions so that anybody looking on YouTube can see it much better
Yeah, but
because it's very
fuck.
funny.
One thing I wanted to comment on was like the societal expectations of like what women like cooking and like doing errands and like child rearing. Like that's like
Cause bitch,
men have
you're
child
living
gender.
rent free. Cause bitch, you're living rent free. That's why you're expected to do those things, right?
Exactly. Yeah, men are like doing all the hard work. Anyways,
Here's my other favorite
That doesn't
bit. Am
count.
I uncomfortable
That
in the
does not
face?
count.
Wait, I just want to note this really quick. Am I uncomfortable in the face of female authority? Why? Right? So, not why or why not, right? So it's obvious. She already answered all these questions. There's only one answer. This is what men think, right?
That's like someone looking at a tree, like a person 50,000 years ago looking at a tree. What does this tree do? Why does this tree do this? I think that's why. Like, she didn't even try to understand the tree, like the man. Just, everything's bad, of course, naturally.
Yeah, and why do I think sexual harassment of women is my like? These are the kinds of like if you do anything in law and you see like testimony of like examining, cross-examining witnesses, or like the whole, classic question of like when did you stop hitting your wife? It's like all of this kind of combined together where, you presume all of these facts based on your questions and and then of course when you say this is a really abusive and awful thing to say, she's like, well, I'm just asking questions. Sorry, I'm just asking the tough questions, okay?
I made like 20 assertions, but I'm asking the question. Like,
Why do you
okay.
definitely do this thing? I think it never occurred to her to question, are men doing these things? Is this what's going on? I think this is to her a given, and she's at a loss for asking why because she's just assumed a bunch of facts that don't make any sense. Anyway, I'm
Yeah,
gonna be AFK for a
those
little bit,
fucking
but I will be
assertions, like-
listening, so I'm just gonna be about a minute here.
Excuse me?
I said I'm gonna
Can
be
you
AFK
repeat
for
that?
just a minute, but I'll be listening.
No, yeah, of course. I just feel like there were like 50% stuff that men do because society or women ask them to. Like, mostly women ask them to. Like, you can't not do those things and expect women to admire or want you. And it's the women driving that because men just want to. We are programmed to procreate. And we will look out into society to see what we have to do to get access to women. That's. We wouldn't. Yeah.
I don't think it's hard to ask women to like step up a little bit now, since like technology has basically gotten rid of any like social expectations that the female general has. So like what are you gonna do now? Like you have to like do something.
I remember Hannah Wallen pointing this out somewhere on Twitter, that even small boys are expected to protect girls, and they're expected to do it just because they're male. I'm honestly struggling to think of anything that females, either
Are
children
expected
or,
to do.
yeah, just because they're female. Like anything. The
Other
only
than
thing,
child rearing, and even that we don't expect of them anymore.
Well, it's like men are not allowed to hit girls. You say if a boy hits a girl, that's bad, and you're probably going to grow up and be a wife beater. And they try to drum that in your head. But what if a girl hits a young boy? Right? No one has ever told for a girl it's okay to hit young men. So there's this kind of irony there where girls are allowed to hit guys, but guys are not allowed to hit girls. It's kind of this outdated bourgeois standard of respecting the gender differences. But in return, if the girl can get away with hitting all the guys, then, well, the girl has the right to treat men as shit because she doesn't believe, or she supposedly has this ideal in her head of what a man should be, which is pretty much perverted and learned through TV shows or
if you actually broke through that, you would just be considered a psychopath, man.
Oh yeah.
Also, like, just because like women are weaker than men doesn't mean like a man like shouldn't be able to physically use force to like get her off of him if she's violently attacked. Like that's a very weak standard. Like,
I actually trained my best friend's girlfriend not to hit him, like Pavlovian standards. I just called her out every time she hit him. I knew it didn't hurt him. I just told her, that's bad. Stop it. Because she thought that was totally cool because she was weak. And I was like, no. I know it doesn't hurt him.
Slapping him or something? Or...
Yeah, hitting him on the shoulder. And of course it didn't hurt him. She was weak. But why the fuck did she think that it was okay to hit him all the time whenever he said something that might have offended her? Like,
well, your average woman isn't even that weak. Like, for example, a woman can still fuck up a man physically if she violently attacks him with fists. Like, for example, it only takes 2 ounces of force to break someone's nose. Most women can break men's noses easily. It's all
about the angle and the amount of momentum.
Exactly. So, like...
Yeah, I just trained her not to hit him because I thought, like, I know he won't ever complain, but I don't like my best friend being hit, even if it's weak, because she was this fucking feminist, and she still is to some degree. And I kind of explained to her, like, you can't talk about all of this shit and do this at the same time. It breaks the logical mold of what you preach. And somehow she listened. Doesn't hit him in public anymore. I hope he's fine in the bedroom. Maybe he likes it. I don't know. But yeah, there's this power dynamic we teach little children because until puberty, boys and girls, they're about the same body strength. But if you don't teach boys not to hit girls and to hit puberty, the girls are gonna get hurt a lot. That's just biological fact.
Depends if the men are going to. I don't think that, like, unless I think that's more of a sign of bad parenting if your boy is aggressive and like physically beating someone. I think that's not necessarily like that should be like taught across the board.
We go over the top. We teach boys not to hit back. That's where we make the mistake.
Yeah, like boys should be able to hit back, obviously.
We should teach both genders not to hit people, but we don't teach girls because they are generally weak and there's not going to be any damage.
Well,
not much damage.
That's the logic that goes behind it, but usually it's not even the case anyways. For example, like I said, it's not that hard to break someone's nose.
No, if you use an object or like a weapon, it's not even hard to kill someone.
Yeah, it's just the lizard brain going into full force, basically. Like they're not actually going to think about it. Like just like all they view is, oh, the woman is somewhat weaker than the man, so therefore he can never defend himself.
That's why I really don't understand this whole teach boys not to rape. We already teach boys not to hurt girls. The ones that rape women or girls, we can't teach them anything. They are psychopaths.
No, they're not psychopaths. They thought rape was legal. They thought rape was legal,
because society didn't tell them that it wasn't a crime. Yeah, of course.
Yeah, that's what they thought.
If only we had told them that it was illegal, man. What amount of rape we could have prevented if we told those guys? Like,
so as long as you
say their middle name.
So as long as you have men teaching women as shit, then men will continue to teach women as shit to abuse. I mean, it's kind of the way it is at the current moment, which is unfortunate. But feminism will use that kind of trope to say why they hate men, even though there's men trying to do the good thing, you know?
Yeah, but I think like the majority of men always try to do the good thing. Mm-hmm. They always keep saying, oh, men oppressed women for thousands of years. In
Yeah,
my
that's not-
country, until 1905, both men and women were basically serfs, working the fields, before we established public schools and forced everyone to go to school. Like, our society only became an intellectual society in Switzerland after 1905. Apart from the rich people, of course, they were already intellectual. And they say, oh, the women were oppressed by the men. And I say, no. All the poor people were oppressed by the few people in power.
Right, and what happens when there's a war? The men get drafted.
Yeah,
The female serfs aren't going to get drafted.
of course. Like, our men got sold to different countries for centuries. That's like this, the Swiss Guard. Napoleon got them. The Tsar from Russia got them. Everybody got them. Like, for some reason, we were known as brave warriors because some Roman guy wrote in his notes, like a Caesar wrote, oh, the Helvetians, they were very brave. Nobody died with a spear in their back. They were all dying with the spear in their front. And that established that we were very brave warriors. I won't lie. If I was in a war in the Middle Ages, I would probably survive. I'm pretty tall. I'm pretty strong. Until artillery came around, I would probably be good. Unless they had some Dutch people. They are very tall.
Is there any other comments?
Comments?
No, yeah, I think
About
we're ready
the
for the
art.
next part here. And this is actually the end of it before we go into the description of the author.
Yeah,
we'll see how
we
she
went on a
closes.
long tangent.
She's gonna. Well, honestly, I think that for this stream, our tangents have been. I mean, yeah, a little bit off the trail, but not out of the forest. I guess we've had other streams where we just go wherever the hell, you know. So I think that this time we've actually had a fairly good balance, I think, of reading it. I think that reading larger chunks of it works pretty well.
Yeah, it was a short chapter, so maybe you.
Yeah, that helps too.
think
So it looks like
it
we
was
will be
better.
probably closing it out on about the 2-hour mark. So anybody watching, you know, obviously thanks for coming too. And anybody, if you're in the voice chat, if you want to open up the YouTube, I appreciate any likes, assuming you like this. Because remember, tiny channel, it all matters. And I'm trying to have
I hate
more
this.
subscribers
I hate
and
this.
more boyfriends than Claire Kaw. That's the point of my channel, it turns out. Anyway.
Yeah.
So she continues. Perhaps only a fraction of the men in this country have joined the new men's movement. It may be that these are the very ones who have felt the strain of their privilege. And there is a larger fraction of men who have begun to notice that they are doing and thinking, what they are doing and thinking, and realize that they no longer claim innocence of the effects of their privilege. They have known for a long while, but haven't had the interest, time, or pressing need to investigate it further. At best, perhaps this new movement indicates that something has awakened in them that has always been there, a questioning of the assumptions by which they have lived. Is the men's movement today a movement? Perhaps it might best be called an occasional manifestation. It has the elements of a fad, a great deal of attention paid for a while and then forgotten, just as the men's movement of the 1970s seems to exist now only in books. A true movement springs up spontaneously everywhere, as did the liberation movements for blacks and women, and then perseveres to change society's fundamental assumptions. What is the use of being a little boy if you have to grow up to be a man? Asked Gertrude Stein. Underneath this cryptic remark is a call to men to look at their assumed entitlements. As hopeful and encouraging as the men's movement is, male supremacy, unstudied and unchallenged, will keep men from moving ahead. It lies with men to face how male supremacy informs every aspect of their lives and what it means in their relationships to women, children, other men, and to the earth. Ooh, there was our eco-feminist dog whistle right at the end, right on the last word.
Yep.
I love it.
I saw that.
I just like how they mix the earth thing with feminism. I always thought green feminism was a fascination, where somehow being a good mom means being good to the earth, and this earth has no patriarchal influences whatsoever. It's kind of like a science fiction thing in some bizarre way, but I guess it works out.
Only in this context.
Sci-fi. I totally agree.
But only in this context I realized this sort of fascism. Fascism. Nah.
Well, you talk about fascinating fascism. What Susan Sontag says, I mean, there's also homo nationalism, where there's just gay guys, and white nationalism and all that conspiracy. But
I have a friend like that. He's called Cult, and he's very interesting.
Oh no, it's a true thing. Homo nationalism. I mean, countercurrents and that whole scene. But again, if we're talking about like green feminism, it's too, not to sound like a centrist, but it's like intersectionality between these things. It's open ended, very creative in some bizarre way, but also very
the original idea. I have to give her some credit for the creativity. I have to. Yeah, unless she heard it from someone else, that's actually pretty wild. It's actually interesting. It's completely false and idiotic, but it's interesting.
So, what I have on the screen now is the author's bio. The first part of it is on the page before, which is clipped, so I'm just going to read that. It's born before women had the vote. Harriet Gill has been a feminist since she was 9 years old. It was then she realized something was wrong. Finding her first consciousness-raising group in Berkeley in 1966 was a turning point in her life. She has been in the women's movement for 25 years. Harriet is a clinical social worker whose work since 1941 has been helping people with life problems. For 5 years on KPBS, the public radio station in San Diego, she has broadcast weekly essays on all aspects of living. Besides the serious study of feminism and its history, she is a student of world affairs, music, art, and architecture. It was her interest in the latter that led her to found Friends of San Diego Architecture 7 years ago. She is the director of this grassroots organization that brings together lay and professional people for monthly lectures and discussions of architecture and design. At 78, her latest effort to remain joined to the human race is strength training. So, I don't know. To me, that just sounded like the whitest thing I've ever read.
Yeah.
It reminded me of the meme where they have like these stalls where you can register for studying their STEM and gender studies, and all the women go through the gender studies and then they hold up these signs, more women in STEM.
No, totally. She's this public worker, right, who's, I get this hardcore champagne socialist vibe, right? To her, you know, she's into art and music and discussion and world affairs, and she's, you know, paid on.
Never had a worry in her life.
Yeah, goes around doing all these things, and it's just like the epitome of
well,
it.
It's more like,
of course she's like this.
If you think if you're a feminist at 9 years old, it obviously mean there's some bourgeois nature to some materialistic middle class ideal.
Like Meghan Markle. Oh,
it's like a hot topic costume. Like a normative person can wear. Anybody can be a feminist, you know.
Yeah, but if you're a feminist at 9 years old, it's your parents that are dressing you up in that costume.
It's like being a vegan at 9 years old or being a punk rocker at 9 years old. It's like a niche, interesting thing, but it's not plausible or real. And so it's just like it has something more to do with the postmodern effect of people wearing things like costumes, and it's not really deeply intellectual.
It's actually kind of reductionist. You don't
know what that 9-year-old went through.
Excuse me?
I'm talking to Pilly. You don't know. Maybe that 9-year-old is totally hardcore.
I wouldn't know.
Maybe.
I don't know. What if she starts speaking like a genius and it's a child prodigy? But
Yeah.
for all, most 9-year-olds don't know anything. So
Hey
I
man,
have
there
a
was at
ground
least one
assumption.
Mozart, right?
It's like I'm gambling on the prejudice that most 9-year-olds are not that. So
Do you think maybe she was like a campaigner for 9-year-olds to have the vote?
Oh, that would be
I mean,
so
I'm-
cute.
I mean, with all the regressive reactions in our modern upbringing, that's how I see Greta Thunberg, like this Swedish climate activist.
Oh, totally.
At first, they pretended like her parents were totally against it, but it turned out they were instrumenting that stuff from the like. When Meghan Markle wrote a letter to Hillary Clinton when she was like 10 years old, that was her father writing that letter. Like, not her biological father, but her stepfather. And people eat that up. Like, oh, that's so inspirational. You were an activist at 9 years old. No, you were not. Your parents were using you.
it's kind of like the whole thing where now this person's trans and his daughter, they's daughter is trans, and so it's revolutionary and kind of it becomes more of again this kind of pretentious thing to show off, and you're not really saying anything.
It's child abuse, child indoctrination. So
it's treating their child like a dog and saying, "Look, I got its ears cropped and everything, and like all that kind of stuff." Like that's literally what it's like.
I trained it to do this trick.
Dogs.
It's very revolting and sick.
And even dogs shouldn't be treated that way.
Like, the greatest geniuses of our pastime. No one, not a single one of them. Of course, feminists will say, oh, those were all men, but none of them developed their potential before puberty. They had interests, of course, but nowadays we're fed this lie that a 9-year-old can be an activist. When I was 9 years old, I wanted to be an astronaut. I wanted to go to space because I thought I would be able to see heaven and see my dead father and stuff like that. Like, children of that age. I'm on the upper echelons of natural intelligence. Like, if I was this stupid to think that there was heaven at 9 years old, how would you explain these people being activists at 9 years old unless they're being actively influenced by their parents? Bullshit. You would have to have an IQ of 200 and above to even be at adult level intelligence at 9 years old, and I don't think that's ever happened, even for Einstein.
Well, and one thing that I really don't like is just this whole culture of kind of like protest and activism, because it's so divorced from the actual consequences, it seems. And like, I just think that it's actually not that difficult for somebody to kind of ape all these things, right? It reminds me of, like, I have these debates with feminists where I say, like, women didn't earn the right to vote, right? That's like my kind of snappy thing to get them to try to shake their brain, right? Because of course they'll say, no, of course women earned the right to vote, you know? And I'm like, no, they didn't. Like, men are subject to the draft and they'll potentially just get drafted and die, right? And
just
they'll say,
shout
but we
to
campaigned, we asked for it. And like, that's their mentality, is because they cried and whined and screamed loud enough and ran around with signs. And I mean, I guess some of the suffragettes were straight up terrorists, you know, because of this, they earned a right to vote through terrorism and whining.
Yeah.
That's literally what it is.
Right.
Terrorism and whining.
But can I just do a small shout out to the chat? That I wanted to build a space elevator at that age as well.
Oh my god, me too.
Much appreciate.
No, Terrence
But
is
yeah,
very
I agree,
excited
space.
about space elevators. I've been telling my students about it. I want it to be the dream of the future. I'm going to incorporate a space elevator into my novella that I'm working on very slowly.
I like the ideal of a hyperloop, though. The ideal that it's like a super fast, which it might be plausible by 2050 or 2060, but I don't know if anybody will build it. So,
But yeah, Spaceman, I agree. Like, basically, they're just shitting their diaper and screaming "wah wah wah," and they don't really have they don't really understand the concept of earning something because it's always given.
Yeah, but look how big the shit was. Look how big the shit was, right? I mean,
Yeah, right.
One sort of baffling response that I've heard to this argument from Kathy Young, I think, was something like, "Oh, but the draft wasn't voting for men wasn't directly like legally contingent on being drafted," or something like that.
yeah, but it was.
Which is like,
She's
But
wrong.
it was, man. That was directly connected, man.
I think it still is the case that in America, if you don't register to vote by, is it 28, you lose entitlement to all kinds of shit. So
Look,
Yeah,
in
and
my
it's like
country,
it's actually a
Switzerland-
very large number
sorry?
of men who have not registered and who are potentially subject to this. It's not very consistently enforced, just because it's kind of a petty thing. But yeah,
can they use their voting rights? Technically,
technically, yeah.
Yeah, but in Switzerland, if you go to the draft, like we have like this draft procedure when you come of age, and if you have physical ailments that prevent you from serving in the military, you just have to pay for it, like 400 francs a year or more if you earn a lot.
I'm just trying to like sort of play devil's advocate though, because it's like she has this out of saying, "Oh well, in practice it's never really enforced, therefore they're not really connected, therefore blah blah blah."
You know, in Switzerland it was that way until 1973, when we gave the women the right to vote without any payback. The males, they got the right to vote because we had the draft. Like it was you will be drafted into war, possibly, but in return you get the right to vote. And women just got it for free.
Yeah, and they also never even gave them men the chance or the choice to say, "Hey, how about I give up my right to vote so I never get drafted?"
No.
Because there's some men who physically just can't do that. Like, they'll get fucking killed like within 5 minutes.
No, I mean, because I was too tall and I had just my collarbone broken when I was being in this draft process when I was 18, he said, you can just pay instead of going into the military service.
Yeah,
that's fine, but the women, they don't have to pay for anything. They can.
I kind of lucked out in the respect that I'm actually like physically like too weak to actually be drafted. So that's sort of like a interesting caveat that happened to me, but I guess I lucked out on that. So
yeah, but you probably have to pay for that, or don't you?
I mean, yeah, but what are you gonna do?
I just thought it was very sexist for the women not to have to pay into that military fund just because they had vagina. Well, they can join the military if they want to, but there's no negative consequences if they don't.
Yeah, you know, there's no concept of men choosing for themselves what they want to be, you know, or what they want in that deal.
Well, they're
because in my
selfish if
opinion,
they
even
do, right?
Sorry, what?
They're selfish if they do.
Yeah, like also in my opinion, that deal is stupid. Anyways, it's not fair. Honest. Like fuck voting if I can get my ass drafted.
Like, I think I said this in the last podcast as well, but in Switzerland, women were the ones who voted against the obligatory, like, every man has to get drafted thing. We had a vote on making it not mandatory, but you could join the military if you wanted. And it actually turned out to be the women who said, no, the men have to do military service. They made the difference, so it didn't get past the vote. And it was very fucked up to me because they had nothing to lose. They just liked the idea of men having to go to the military. But when it comes to abortion, they say, no, only women should vote on that because it only affects women.
Yeah. And I think, the natural consequence of that, like Spacepan has pointed out, is that women will be shamed into oblivion by future humans. They will be forever known as solipsistic cunts. So there's somewhat like justice, or ironic justice there, I suppose, but...
Yeah,
I mean,
there is and there isn't, right? Because it's like, do they even care about their memory after they're dead?
Yeah, they don't. But...
They don't. But no, I mean...
Well, at least
it's just fucked up.
There's kind of a balance to it, but... And
at least they'll not get away with it completely, I guess.
But men will vote in favor of women when it comes to women's issues. We like women. We love women. We will vote in favor of the women. But when it comes to men's issues, they apparently don't care. They just want men to suffer.
That's why men are mostly the problem, actually, because like men are the men's worst enemy because they don't care about other men. They view them as competition. And because of male ego, they like to shrug off things, like saying it's not a big deal. I'm strong, I'm awesome,
Actually, I was at my mother's place today, and I watched the news about domestic violence only happens to women and girls, and all the perpetrators are men and boys. And her boyfriend actually said, I've never heard a man talk about being a victim of domestic violence. Like, yeah.
That's the funny thing, right? Is the big feminist narrative regarding rape is that it's underreported. And,
men are so afraid
maybe these men aren't reporting,
talk about
right?
this.
What women will do, right, is they'll say that, I mean feminists, what they'll argue is that it's a gendered crime, right? And so much of it is unreported, right? And if you include all the unreported stats, that means it's even worse for women. Except for the fact that if you consider the circumstance of somebody trying to report something, if you're a male, you understand that you're just not going to have access to any kind of resources and that you have kind of a societal backlash. And, in regards to the second point, they're definitely going to buy into all those arguments based on this notion that patriarchy hurts men too, right? So insofar as there's an underreporting bias, once if you could actually, snap your fingers and have access to all of that data, it would definitely skew it more toward men. If you just look at the unreported instances of any crime, whether it's violent crime, whether it's sexual violence, whatever it is. And this is something that
there was this show on the British telly where a guy said my girlfriend locked me in the first floor and I had to jump out of the window because she locked me in, and I was really scared because she said she was going to get some weapons. And the whole audience laughed. And I really respected the moderator for saying, this is very sick. If the victim had been a woman, they would have probably been shocked. But if they thought it funny that a man jumped out of the first floor because he was scared of his girlfriend.
Yeah, no, I think I saw that clip. I think I did. It reminds me actually a lot of... I mentioned it a lot, but there's a clip you can find on YouTube. If you haven't seen it, definitely watch it. It's from the 90s. Her name is Faith something. Not Faith Goldie. Different Faith. But she has a PUA, an MRA, and a male feminist on a panel talking about what women really want, right? And it's so funny what pure characters these are. And the MRA there is Mel Fight, and it's a long-haired dude who shows up in a dress, right? Like he's just like completely like radical and like fucking awesome. You know, like, why are you wearing a dress? And he's like, well, because I knew I was gonna bait you into the criticizing me for it. And like it's very funny because the PUA will like pull all of this like sophistic bullshit which will work on the women, right? And like the MRA is just pointing to him being like, everything you women are doing is validating what he's saying about you. He's just pointing it out to their faces, and this audience of all women are too stupid and solipsistic to see what's going on. Like, that clip alone just tells you everything you need to know about the, you know.
Yeah,
the
that video was amazing.
It's amazing. It's like a must-watch video. Like,
Like, people say brave and stunning in all the worst places, but that was brave and stunning.
no, yeah. Oh,
Who's that man's name again? I'm sorry.
We just went over 2 hours, so I think we're gonna wrap it up here. I wanted to mention I was talking to Church of Entropy, and she wants me to debate someone on anarcho-capitalism. Now, I've done this before, where I've debated people on ANCAP, and you can kind of predict these debates. They generally don't. They're not very fruitful, I guess. Maybe a couple of people find them interesting.
Good luck on our show. So I don't know what's going to happen. Like one time I was invited to come on. I think everyone jumped me. So I don't know. I don't know what's going to happen, Spaceman. Good luck.
Yeah, I don't know. I mean, I trust, like she actually does do a pretty good job of kind of controlling, moderating, and, like, I do genuinely believe that she likes to have conversations, you know? And I get that, like, it's a whole circle of very weird people, so weird stuff comes up. And, you know, I'm weird, too, so I think I kind of fit in.
Yeah, I think you'll do fine, but anything, I don't know. Last time I was on, people jumped me because I was pilleater, and it was really nasty, but whatever. Then I switched it to board games.
She wants to do a series of like one-on-one debates surrounding a topic, and she has this whole debate rubric for how she'll judge it all, which I don't know how much I care about that rubric or anything. I kind of like read through it, and I'm like, this all seems like reasonable stuff.
You know, that's what you're doing. You're submitting yourself to the dungeon master, who's Church of Entropy. So good luck on that.
Well, we'll see what happens. It can't be any worse than when me and Omni Zoa had our debate. That was pretty bad.
Well, fingers crossed, man. Fingers crossed.
You know, it's fine. But no, I wanted to debate feminism. I guess she was going to have Jay defend feminism, and I'm like, I'll fucking go up against him. And she's like, oh, I already found someone for that, and since you do the ANCAP thing, will you do that? And I'm like, this is bullshit. Just because the ANCAP position's less popular, topic, you know, I'm more, like, they're like, oh, that's your value because you can do the ANCAP thing. But it's like, I can do all three of the tricks. I can do the atheism thing, the ANCAP thing, and the anti-feminism thing at the same time.
Crazy. Are you good at the anti-circumcision thing?
Yeah, that too, you know.
If in need, call that card, because in Western culture, it's very sexist right now.
No, yeah, and honestly, MGM, that's my one move checkmate, my favorite one move checkmate against feminists, and like I go really radical, I go ham on them to the point where they're just like, you're a crazy person. I need to like either you need to have
I would probably use it at the first instance, but keep it in your backhand as a killer move.
I know, yeah, it depends on the circumstance, but I know I was talking to Claire Caw about it, right? Because I go under a comment. She made a video about like all the times I lost debates, and I'm just like, you didn't mention that time when you made your video defending circumcision and you got ratioed. Like, more dislikes than you've ever had views, woman, right? That just didn't get mentioned. And of course, she does her whole thing because
I gotta check how much. Crazy. I haven't checked her newest stuff on.
But the reason I mentioned it is actually just because it reminded me of she tried to bring up this argument of, well, I don't hear men complain about it, and it's like, well, nobody accepts this when we talk about women who don't, you know, who report that they don't have a problem with being circumcised, and of course it scales with education. It's uneducated women who, like, the overwhelming majority are like, I'm fine being genitally cut, and then once they're college educated, it's like 50-50 or something stupid. Like it's like ludicrous. But like
No,
when it comes to
I
rape,
mean-
it's like okay,
Sorry?
if feminists are claiming that like 80% of all rapes are unreported, like can I take this and then say, well, I guess 80% of rapes like they don't think it's that big of a deal, therefore let's just legalize rape. Like this is essentially the argument. People say people don't complain about male genital cutting
Yeah,
enough.
it's fucked up.
Yep.
Yeah. It's all fucked.
Anyway,
So, okay, with this book, with this wretched book, which I'm almost finished with, there's 2 essays left, and 2 weeks from today, I'll be in Chicago for the International Conference on Men's Issues, and I finally get
so
to meet
glad
Prince
you're
of
going.
Queens. I get to meet Prince of Queens. I get to meet Logan McCree.
Oh, wow.
And then I get to also go
Yeah.
to I get to also see Allison Tiemann. I saw Allison and Karen. And the other honey badgers back in 2014 when I went to the first ICMI. But I was
I
a
saw
little
the
too
video
nervous.
where you were in for 5 seconds.
Yeah, I was on a Vice. Yeah, I talked to
Prince
Vice,
of
and there was
Queens
like
never
a tiny
shows
clip
his
of
face,
me.
right?
Huh?
Prince of Queens never shows his face.
No, he
'Cause
doesn't.
I don't-
I'm pretty sure I.
So
I'm
in
pretty sure I
theory,
saw him.
yeah, in theory, I could totally just like take a picture of him and just like dox him and like expose him. But
Like those guests, they actually, never wanted to touch American soil.
All I'm gonna say is that Prince of Queens, his voice does not match his body whatsoever.
Yeah, Robert Stark always wanted to meet Prince of Queens.
Let's
but
not body shame people. Maybe he's too
It's
skinny,
not
maybe
body
he's too
shame.
fat, but I don't
Not
even
body
want
shame.
to know. Like he needs to stay anonymous.
I don't
yeah,
think he
sure.
does. I think he's very paranoid. I think that like
He told me his name was Sam and he was once a DJ.
Yeah.
Let's not fucking dox.
No, that's the only thing.
We're not-
No, yeah, we're not gonna put him out of the closet. He can reveal. She needs to have a big extravagant live stream where he does a face reveal. You know, he should do that. Make an event of it since he's been anonymous so long. I kind of regret, right, that I just went out with my face right away, just because there's kind of a fun spectacle to that, to like being anonymous for so
Yeah.
long. But whatever.
Because just the fact that I am on these streams might expose me to people who know me as Fliegen First, and I don't fucking care if they have a problem with what I said on these streams. I don't fucking care. But if you want to protect your personal identity, I much respect that, because there's so much shit going on these days.
Yeah, and like the way I see it is there kind of needs to be a vanguard of people who come out with their faces, and then at some point people are going to realize like, wait a minute, like, you know, did Gavin McInnes really do anything to warrant all of this backlash, right? Like any number of people you name, like all these unpersoned people who have shown their faces, like did they really do anything bad, right? And like I feel like that vanguard has happened, and now we're gonna enter the second stage where it's like, you know what, like we're gonna have to just learn to be tolerant,
Yeah,
you know, to tolerate views.
I mean, one approach would be everyone show their names, everyone show their faces.
It's
That
already
came-
like that, actually.
I'm
They can't
actually an
fuck all
anime
of us.
character.
I mean, it's already like that, even in the protest scene, where it's like people can be easily identified and like no one cares anymore. And it's kind of just like everyone's being angry, and so it's only that the far right. It's only been the far right scene has been concerned about quote unquote doxing and about their identity.
No,
and really-
I'm actually in an activist scene, and one of the more prominent guys, Gregory Malchuk, he got death threats. Like, I don't think they're credible. I think that's just shit posting, but Twitter
Yeah, it's
didn't
like-
do shit.
It seems like if you're into the far left sphere, it's like it's okay to be out in public because it's like culturally, it's kind of just like you're fighting for.
Because that's the
Yeah, something like that, where it's like it's more easy to be radical in the public sphere.
They have
When it's
nothing
the
to
far
fear.
right.
Yeah, that's
you're
because they
fearing
have
and
nothing to
doxing.
fear. That's because leftist so-called like terrorism is just another wing of the Democratic Party. You know, it's government-sanctioned violence, and it's the same crap that's
Okay.
happening in Hong
Yeah,
Kong.
that's
is all
why
terrorists
I
here
much
are just,
appreciate
like, paid
that
for by the government.
Antifa is gonna be a terrorist organization nationwide.
I mean, there's already college professors who are open about being Antifa, and it's just like kind of a norm at this point.
Yeah, and
it's
honestly,
just like-
like I think Trump should probably. I mean, you know, there's an argument pragmatically to be made against this, but like in theory, if he were to make the argument that he's going to declare martial law to go after Antifa people in America, like I'd be like that sounds fine. I hope you succeed. Like if somebody
It'd be
identifies
hilarious.
as a communist, if you identify as a communist, that's literally a promise that you're going to try to starve me to death, given the opportunity. So like,
Hey,
like, you just
if you're not
declared
gonna be
war.
violent, I don't fucking care. You're
Can
gonna
we
be
get our own
ineffectual.
MAGA Liberty?
But
I'd like that.
that guy, that Antifa guy that threw firebombs at the ICE facility, that should be a wake-up call to all Americans. Like,
Oh yeah, that was pretty alarming to me, given
that's
like
terrorism.
how much
I
radicalizing.
don't know how to call that by any other name but terrorism. Like, firebombs. What?
Yeah, they're trying to kill people.
Well, and
He
here's
was
a
even
fun
trying to
fact.
kill the people he is in favor of, like the refugees or migrants or whatever you want to call them. Like he was willing to set them on fire.
Actually,
That guy
this
was
is funny.
fucking insane.
This is gonna bring it back to the very beginning of this stream, which is I was watching the first Democratic debate, and they were talking about immigration, and they were all saying, "Yes, of course we need to secure the border." Like they're all saying this, but they're saying, "Oh, but the way Trump's going about it is so racist and divisive and awful." And it made me realize, you know what? If Trump were to lose the 2020 election, he actually might end up inadvertently achieving more of the things that were promised. Just because now the Democrats are in a point where like they basically would have to deliver on it, or they would deliver on Trump's promises just to make the point. And that they would not have to deal with the obstruction that they've been putting him through. And I don't know how realistic that perspective is, but that thought had occurred to me, is that like these Democrats are now saying like, yeah, of course we'll secure the border, of course we'll have like reasonable standards for citizenship and things like that. And like this was something that sure as shit they would not be talking about if it weren't for
Yeah,
the
but
scenario that Trump
I don't know
created.
about Biden, but Bernie talked about that pre 2016. Like,
Yeah.
Like Trump essentially ejected that into the conversation, whether they like it or not.
and then
Exactly,
that's
yeah.
where they pretended like they never wanted it, even though they said they wanted it in 2015. So I just hope that Kamala Harris and Elizabeth Warren are out of the race. And I don't like Biden. I used to like Bernie. I just hope they make Bernie the candidate and he still has some pull because he is anti-establishment.
Yeah, I don't know. I guess we have Macho
Worst case-
making
I'm
the 40
probably
chess
going to vote for
argument.
Trump again.
In the live chat, he's
Worst-
referencing the 40
I gotta
chess
go,
thing.
guys.
And maybe,
Sorry.
maybe.
Well, actually, I can't vote honestly, but because I didn't vote for Trump either because I wasn't registered to vote.
But I'm not afraid of 4 more years of Trump. Because
I mean,
nothing
I'd
bad
support
happened so far.
Trump is what I.
Like George W. Bush Jr. was worse than Trump in his first 4 years for America. I don't think the world's gonna fall apart, even if he gets reelected. But I really, really don't want that.
The way I
Just-
see it is that Trump was supposed to be the small government candidate. He was the non-politician who was going to come in and drain the swamp and fix a lot of these things. And, you know, whether or not he's made a good faith effort, you can make, I think, an argument either way. And it's hard to say because so much of it is going on behind the scenes. But I think that because of this, it's kind of revealed a lot. And I guess it's
I don't
hard to
really
say.
know how it works. Like unemployment is the lowest for minorities that it ever was. The Dow Jones is an all-time high.
Okay, yeah, but do you want to know the real way to get rid of unemployment? Is end the minimum wage. Bam. End the
This
minimum
$15
wage.
thing that they passed, I hope it doesn't come to actually be a reality because
I agree, Spaceman. Especially now to the fact that they're raising minimum wage across the state of New York by 2020 to $15. That's going to be fucking retarded because no one's going to get a job now. They're just going to have to like lay off people because they're paying more
There's
for what.
technology now. Like
Yeah, exactly. It's not worth
and
it for
stuff
the
like
business
that.
owners.
You
And people are gonna get laid off, and they're gonna be like, "Oh, well, where's our money?" It's because they can't fucking hire you now. You dipshit.
like the reasonable approach would have been to ban illegal labor. Like they work for less than $5 an hour. That
Yeah,
depletes
but like
the.
I don't have a problem with that necessarily. You know what I mean? Like I think the issue with immigration is that if you get rid of the welfare state, then there's no incentive for it. So just get rid of the welfare state. That's the best wall of all, you know? Just get rid of the welfare state, get rid of minimum wage, get rid of regulations on businesses, end the war on drugs, and immediately it'll shut down all the drug cartels, it'll end a lot of gang violence, it'll create economic
Yeah, I don't agree with it 100%, but some of your points, man, like some of those, get rid of that. You know?
Well, and that's when I say these things, I meet countless people who are like, actually, yeah, that makes a lot of sense. But, like, politically, any one of these positions are considered suicidal. So it's like, it's this weird paradox, and that's what makes me sympathetic to, like, the Andrew Yang perspective, because his policies aren't going to work. They're not going to work the way he's saying they're going to work. The only defense of him is the collapsitarian route, where he goes full FDR and collapses the economy, and it creates a power vacuum where somehow the libertarians prevail in the end.
Yeah, but Yang's not going to be the candidate.
I mean, honestly, he's my favorite.
The DNC.
He's my favorite. I like Tulsi Gabbard, although I've heard that, I guess, her military thing, she's, like, lied about it or whatever. I haven't looked into that, so that kind of matters.
Tulsi Gabbard, she should be the first women president.
She's probably the best.
If that's the outcome.
The best presidential candidate
better than Hillary.
That's been a woman ever was Dr. Mary Ruwart, and she did not get the Libertarian nomination. She lost to fucking like Bob Barr, which was some retarded bullshit.
I just heard from a lot of conservatives that they would vote for Tulsi Gabbard if it was Tulsi against Trump.
I might actually look at Tulsi, honestly, into supporting her. But
yeah, I mean, the way I'm kind of leaning towards non-vote. I'm kind of leaning towards like to vote is seen as a tacit endorsement of the system, and like when I voted for Trump, it was because he was this non-politician, and I thought maybe this will
anti-establishment
in a net reduction in the size of government, and we haven't seen that. He hasn't actually reduced the size of government. He just kind of feng shuied it a little bit, but and to me, like that's, you know, I get that he didn't necessarily run on reducing the government explicitly, but you know, at this point, I think that people who support the existence of government, eventually they should be held accountable and forced to pay reparations. To me specifically, to all the ANCAPs, we should get reparations. That's the real reparations argument. Anyway, well, so we've been rambling about 20 minutes after finishing the text. I'm really actually looking forward to the era where I can have streams where I'm done with this wretched book, but I'm going to grin and bear it for another week here. Next week, I'm either going to read the last two, or I'm going to do like one of them and then maybe like 5 hours later do the other bit of it, because a week from then I'm going to be traveling. So within 2 weeks, both of these last two chapters will be done. Then I can give this book back to the Twin Cities Men's Center. And then I'm going to read TFM's book. And then I'm going to try to read that while I'm in Minnesota, so that when I give back this book, I'll also donate my copy of TFM's book to their library. So that's what I got.
Oh, I love... I should get that book. I want to read that.
Yeah, I don't know if TFM would appreciate me like reading the whole thing on the channel like I did with this one. I feel like he actually might be cool with that. I think he'd probably prefer like more reviews, but But definitely like book club
I
style.
think that would be interesting if you.
Dude, get it. Get
you,
the book.
read it
Get the
live.
book. We'll have a book club. We'll like totally. How about this? Like maybe 3 weeks from today, we can have a book club of anybody who's read 13 Rules for Not Being a Fucking Cuck by T.F. Monkey, a very reputable scholar in our circle. All right. Does anyone have any closing thoughts on anything we've read? Anything you just want to get off your chest?
I just really wish that this woman would realize that men aren't necessarily. A lot of the problems, like with, say, women in authority positions, really stem from the fact that women really aren't spec to do it because they're still coddled like women, and they can still use the pussy pass whenever they want. So therefore, they don't have the necessary life experiences to really have good insight on these sorts. So that's why I don't want them in leadership positions unless they actually have like the necessary life experiences, and not born with a silver spoon in their mouth, essentially.
Well, and what's funny is what you
Like,
just said. Most people would say that was very like misogynistic, but it's actually quite white pill. There's actually quite a lot of hope there, and I think that my perspective is pretty similar.
Like, I want women to
Earn it.
carry their own weight,
Like meritocracy. Like women can do this as well. It's not. They don't have to be coddled. They can achieve this on their own merit. You don't need to help them if they actually want this, which is why I think that's the problem. Like, they don't want this. It's a fucked up life.
Well, and you know what? I'm fine with half the Senate being women if it's Karen Strawn and Allison Tiemann and Cassie J and Janice Fimenko and Diana Davison and Clary Jackson and like all the, you know what I mean? Like I could find you 25 women who absolutely, I'd and if I could clone them and then make that all 50, make it 100% women, absolutely.
Yeah, but just look at the struggle of Tiaman with the Canadian courts. She lost. She should have won. Like, the feminists, they don't like strong women. They like
I'm talking magic
of a
wand
strong
here.
woman.
I'm talking magic wand, but that's another thing too. Is like honey badgers, they get slandered. I think for saying, "Oh, you're just a bunch of money grubbing, greedy people," and like, it's bullshit. If you really look at the quality of their content and how much of it they put out and what they've built and the community they've fostered, there's really not anything like it. And like, I think it's so shitty that for all the work they've done, that like that's a lot of people's takeaway. And I think that in particular, like if Karen Strawn speaks to people in a way that's very on the ground and immediately accessible, and it hits them in ways that are so obvious. She has just a way of just immediately kind of bringing it down to what matters, right? Whereas Allison is kind of stepping into this feminist shadow world and kind of like playing around with some of the things there in order to find some like hidden truths under the rocks.
Dark. It was so dark. Like 1 or 2 months ago, when Allison made this video about her suicide attempt, like it really shook me. That a person so strong was still so fragile. Like it could have happened to any man. Like, Alison Tiemann is stronger than me.
Well, and I
she
think, she also speaks a lot about how she used to be agoraphobic, And, when you see her videos and the strength of what she says and her perspective and her reasoning, the idea that she'd be, like, afraid to go outside is, like, it's so strange.
Yeah, it was my favorite content of the Honey Badgers was the rationing when she and Mike, the random accam, did the rationing together.
Yeah, yeah.
It
They'd edit
always-
it together, and they'd do a kind of a funny thing where one of them would comment, and then I think Mike or Allison would comment first, and then Mike would edit it later. So he would have like a response to what she had commented, right?
Yeah,
And it was
that
kind of
was
funny
fucking
because
brilliant.
I don't think I've seen any other
Like-
YouTubers do that style of collaborative response video. That kind of
Also,
arose naturally.
you could tell the amount of endearment that Mike has for her. Like, it's not just respect. I don't think he has a boner for her, but that's love. That's what they did together. That was love. Like, and Mike is a fucking misanthropic kind of person. And if she gained his trust and respect to that degree, the whole Honey Badger crew, they are such a... They are precious. And they got attacked legally for what they were doing. It's so sad.
Yeah.
And they lost a trial in Canada. Like, fuck Canada. Please come to my country. Just test out the waters. Canada is fucked. People kind, fuck you.
Or hey, maybe if like China kind of backs the fuck off for a little bit, then maybe Hong Kong will look a little attractive too. Which,
Oh,
okay,
Hong
I know
Kong
that
is
there's been a
gone.
lot about Hong Kong in the news, but I want to tell you, it's
No,
not
no,
like
it's
everything's
gone.
on fire. Like, it's still an okay place. I still say you can still visit here safely and still enjoy things. I'm just throwing it out there.
No, I'm just saying, Hong Kong, they had like, on one day, they had 3/4 of the population demonstrating. And it doesn't fucking matter.
Well, it was
China
more like
doesn't
half.
fucking care.
It was more like half, but I think you get 3/4 if you like consider that like there's children, right? If you take out the children, it's like the
It
adult
depends
population.
on the way you count, but that's the popular number, and I will take it, even if it was just half.
But
What
yeah.
country do you know where half of the population went to the streets?
No, yesterday
It's
we
insane.
had we had a drive-by fireworks attack, which is like
Oh yeah,
the most fucking Chinese thing I've ever heard. Is like a drive-by shooting where they use fireworks because guns are banned. But
Yeah, fucking hell,
like,
man.
I'm kind of
forgot
joking.
you
but,
are in
like,
Hong Kong.
I don't want to make light of it too much, but here's the thing:
People got hurt.
It's all
People
on video.
died.
It's all on video. They got pictures with the license plate and everything. But of course, like this person's not going to get arrested, right? Yeah. So it is kind of a scary situation, but
No, it's a losing battle because China doesn't give a fuck. They really don't.
okay. Well, what
It
pisses
all
me off
depends
though
on
is like
the-
even if the Hong Kongers get everything they want, they're saying why can't we have democracy? And I'm just like, no. Like, what's the point of fighting the communists if you're just gonna have like universal suffrage? You're just gonna have your communism fast, like quick and painless, or slow and awful, right? But like, I get that that's kind of like beyond the issue, you know. But
Yeah, but it's really just I don't think they're gonna get what they want because China doesn't fucking care.
no, yeah, and China's obviously playing a strategic game. They know what's going on, so yeah, Kowloon
They
Walled City
understand
was in Ancapistan,
what's
and there was
happening.
nothing wrong with it, and then the government destroyed it for no reason.
I mean, they already got the protesters to become violent, while they originally wanted to be peaceful.
No, but that's hardly even the case. There's like a few of them who vandalized a building or whatever. Like they're not
No,
actually. It's a pretense. Is they're
doesn't
saying that
matter.
they're violent so that they can justify responses to it, and that's what's
Yeah,
going
but
on.
the
here.
West, like my country, we got the pictures, the images of protesters trying to blind the policemen with lasers. I'm pretty sure that was just one instance, but China's gonna use this. They're gonna frame these people as
Yeah, and in
violent people.
general, though, like when you consider like the number of people participating in this protest and how like civil and neat and everything it all was, it's pretty remarkable. So,
99.9 of the protests were non-violent.
yeah, well, I mean,
That's
we'll
my
see what
impression.
happens. I guess we'll see what happens. Hopefully, I don't know. I don't know.
I just
I
don't
really don't know
see
what to
China
say.
chiming in. Like, China, they don't give a fuck. They didn't give a fuck about Tibet. They didn't give a fuck about anything, and they're not gonna give a fuck about Hong Kong. They're just gonna wait their turn, put pressure on, make people more violent in their protests until they can strike them down.
Well, I mean,
It's
all they have to
fucking
do is
sad.
wait 50 years. They literally only have to wait 50 years before they have the legal authority to just literally take over. So,
2047 or something.
yeah, exactly. So it's very silly that they're trying to push through things like this extradition bill when it's like all you have to do is just wait. Just like make everyone learn Mandarin in the
Yeah, but
meantime, and then you should be fine. But I don't know. We'll see what
but who's
happens.
protecting Hong Kong? Like, nobody's protecting Hong Kong. Nobody fucking cares.
Which is
The
sad.
West
I say to
doesn't.
everybody, like, you should check it out while you have the opportunity. You know, that's kind of one of the reasons I came here. Is I thought, you know, like if this place is only gonna last so many years, and it's supposed to be like the most free marketplace in the world, let's see what it looks like. And it's really a
I'm
phenomenal
not trying
place.
to
I'm
be a
gonna live here
pessimist, but I
absolutely
think
as
it's
long
one
as
of
I can manage. You know.
no, it's very cool that you're there, but I'm not trying to be pessimistic, but I don't see a future for this model of two states, one state, two systems. They want to break it up, and
And you know what?
China
Seasteading.
is fucking powerful.
Crypto and seasteading, I think 10 years from now, it's going to be miles ahead of where it is. So we'll see what happens. But, okay, so that was.
I hope everything
I
goes
assume
well.
we're not live anymore.
Sorry, what?
I don't think we're live anymore. It's like
No, we're still
I
live.
hope
I should
not.
probably not be live.
Yeah, it was
though.
more of a quick.
Because we're really off topic.
because we're really off base.
I know, we kind
Yeah.
of rambled. Okay,
But-
so, alright. Bye-bye, everybody. We are no longer live. Keep it easy. Put the word to the mother. And yeah, I'll be around here next week, same time. Hopefully finishing this godforsaken book. And then on this channel, we can have live streams where we talk about things that are different. Like not this fucking awful book. Like we can rereading John Stoltenberg's essay on refusing to be a man because I want advice from the man who is gay and married to Andrea Dworkin on how to be a man. So, all kinds of great literature out there.
That's gonna be